Hello, and welcome to this Actual Tech Media Megacast. Today's topic is Zero Trust Security. And I want to start by saying a big thank you for joining us. On the Megacast today, we've got some of the most innovative leading companies in the industry. You'll be hearing from experts at CrowdStrike, Keeper, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, AMD, Axis, Rubrik, Beyond Identity, and Zscaler. That is a lot of different sessions full of innovative solutions, hot trends, and creative strategies all in one place. So settle in and get ready to learn. In order for you to get the most out of your day today, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping details. Of course, we do have some of those awesome prizes lined up for you, and I'll get back to those in just a moment. But first, I want to draw your attention to the questions box in your webinar control panel. If you haven't already said hi, there is a huge audience out there today, and so many of your industry colleagues and peers are gathered together for this Megacast. So reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. We also want this to be an informative event for you, which means we want to see those technical questions. So throughout today's Megacast, we hope you'll get engaged and make sure to ask all the questions that you have about the solutions and strategies that we're going to be exploring together. Not only will we have team members responding to you during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of each presentation. So if we don't get to your question during the live event, don't worry. The subject matters from all of our companies today, CrowdStrike, Keeper, HPE, Axis, Rubrik, Beyond Identity, and Zscaler. We'll be following up with you afterwards. Now, we all know that good things should be shared. So today on the Megacast, when you hear something awesome or exciting, be sure to share it with your friends. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's Megacast will automatically be added to your post. And while you're exploring that audience console, make sure to check out the Handouts tab, where you'll find some fantastic resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We've got an information-packed collection of solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming events, and more. So click around that handout section and download some of those awesome resources. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Scott Becker. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this incredible Megacast today. My fellow awesome moderator, Jeff Steinbach, may be joining later as well. Now, as always, it's not just awesome content that we're giving away today. We also have fantastic prizes. So let me walk you through the lineup. Today we'll be giving away 5 Surface Laptop 4s. And we'll also be giving away $500 Amazon gift cards every 30 minutes. Now, as a reminder, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prizes, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, you can find the full T's and C's in the Handouts tab. Again, just click into that Handouts section of your audience console and scroll down to the bottom. You will find it there. We'll follow up with all the winners after the event. And again, if you have any questions about whether or not you're eligible to win any of the prizes today, just check out those terms and conditions in the Handouts tab. And just a few quick reminders on the slide here. All grand prize winners are required to submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. Now, if you are a winner here today, you always have the option to donate the value of the prize to one of our selected charities. Thanks to generous prize winners on previous Actual Tech Media events, thousands of dollars have been donated to these wonderful charities. So if you are a lucky winner and you'd like to get involved with one of these amazing organizations, just let us know, and we would love to help make that happen. As I mentioned earlier, that question section of your audience console is great for posting feedback. Also, by the way, any technical issues that might come up today, a quick reminder that a browser refresh will fix just about any issues with slides, audio, or video. But if not, throw a comment in the question section, and our crew is standing by to help. That said, the absolute most important thing to remember here is how we love getting all of your insightful questions during these live events. Your questions really make these events go. So, and in fact, we love your questions so much, we have a special additional prize for all of you out there. In today's Megacast, we'll be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card to the best question asked in each of our live sessions. And let me repeat that. each of the sessions. So we have 7 different sessions going on. That's 7 opportunities to ask the best question. So the teams will review all the questions asked after the event, which means even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there's still a chance to win. Again, we're so happy to have you all here at the live event today. We want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social. First, use that Twitter button we chatted about earlier. It'll add the hashtag for today's event as you share all the exciting things that you're learning. And next, make sure to connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and Facebook. We want to hear from you. And if you are looking for more awesome content after the Megacast today, make sure to subscribe to Actual Tech Media on YouTube. And while you're exploring, we also have some great content for you on LinkedIn, so make sure to reach out and connect with us there. And speaking of exciting content, if you haven't checked out the Actual Tech Media Guerrilla Guide Book Club, now is the time. The Guerrilla Guide Book Club gives you access to free enterprise IT books written by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle or mobile device, and they are all completely free. You can download these awesome resources at GuerrillaGuide.com, and there's a link in the Handouts tab for you as well. Actually, we've got one more way to win a prize, and that's to refer an industry friend or coworker to the Actual Tech Media event series. You'll find a link to do that right in your Handouts tab, and you'll be automatically redirected at the end of the event as well. And we promise not to spam your friends and coworkers. We will send them an invitation to a list of upcoming events, and if they don't respond, they will only get one more reminder from us. So both you and your coworker could win a $300 Amazon gift card, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend, because it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Okay, we've covered a lot of really important things already, and now here to get us thinking about Zero Trust security and what Zero Trust means exactly is our great keynote speaker, Ned Bellavance. He's a Pluralsight trainer and author and a Microsoft MVP. Ned, we are geared up and ready to get rolling on this Megacast, so let's get moving. The mic is all yours.
Hey everyone, I'm Ned Bellavance, and I thought we'd have a chat about Zero Trust just to kick off the event. Zero Trust doesn't exist. There is no spoon. Not to get all Neo in the Matrix on you, and well, technically that was the child at the Oracle's place and not Neo, but anyhow, when we talk about Zero Trust, there's this platonic ideal of a Zero Trust architecture, and then there's the reality of actually getting work done. Today, I thought I would briefly examine what Zero Trust means and how you can approach it practically. Now, you have to trust something. The term Zero Trust dates all the way back to an academic paper that was published in 1994. But the first time it was used in reference to a network architecture is in a 2010 Forrester report. The idea sprang out of a recognition that the traditional castle and moat architecture for most networks was no longer applicable, especially with the cloud, and that an alternative was required to secure systems and services. The basis of this perimeter-free architecture would be identity. Going back to the beginning with traditional data center networks, the perimeter-based architecture I just mentioned with the castle and the moat, that was always somewhat flawed. The core idea was that you would segment your network into different zones of trust, and anything inside a given segment was trusted, while things coming from outside that segment would be untrusted, and so you would inspect that traffic with some type of appliance like a firewall or an IDP. The classic example here is a data center that has firewalls sitting between the public internet, maybe a DMZ, and the servers on the internal network. The segmentation was achieved by that security stack, and that became a major choke point for cross-segment traffic and also a major profit source for network vendors who were selling these big, expensive metal boxes. Now that firewall, or that IDP that sits in the middle, is filtering traffic usually based on IP addresses, ports, and sessions, and it generally has no idea of the higher layers of traffic, like layer 7. From a security standpoint, as long as the IP address and port look good, the traffic's allowed through. opening the door to all manner of attacks and exploits in the upper layers. Now, some next-gen firewalls do their best to mitigate this by looking for certain patterns in the traffic or even terminating a TLS session that's encrypted, doing some traffic inspection on that session, and then re-encrypting and sending the good traffic along. But once the traffic enters the trusted network segment, it is exactly that. It is trusted. So, if an attacker establishes a beachhead on a server inside your trusted environment, you're kind of out of luck. They can begin their lateral movement across the segment, poking and prodding the other servers and services for vulnerabilities and exploits, secure in the knowledge that their traffic on the segment is going to be trusted. That's because the network trust is based on IP addresses and ports and not on the identity of the source. For all intents and purposes, the IP address, that is the identity. And honestly, that's not enough. We need a better solution for authorization and authentication. That was pretty obvious on the application side of the house a while ago, where you were dealing with tons of public systems on the internet that don't necessarily trust each other. So that gave rise to things like certificates, tokens, federation, and standards like OAuth or OIDC. Of course, you can call an architecture zero trust, but as I implied at the beginning, it still trusts something. And that's a key thing to bear in mind when designing a zero trust architecture. In most cases, it boils down to a certificate chain or a shared secret between two federated systems. As a server, let's say, I trust the root CA that issued your certificate, and therefore I implicitly trust you. Extending zero trust. At its core, zero trust is about identity and verifying identities when they attempt to access your services. For instance, when you want to log into your Office 365 account, you have to provide at least your username and password, and that's an identity. In addition, you might enable MFA with a YubiKey that adds an additional layer of identification, something that you know, your username and password, and something that you have, the YubiKey. Once your identity is validated, the system gives you a token that is only valid for a limited period of time, and it has limited permissions associated with it. That's the goal of zero trust. A strong way to verify the identity of requests that come into a service, and a control mechanism for granting permissions on a limited basis in a time-bound way. Any solution that claims to be zero trust and does not implement these features is doing a little bit of product marketing sleight of hand. Zero trust on the public internet is kind of a natural stance, since it is a combative environment. You expect malicious actors to be present, and you guard yourself accordingly. But traditionally, your internal network has lacked those controls due to the assumption that you are in a trusted and protected space. The moat of network segmentation and the security stacks seem to provide ample protection, at least in theory. But the combination of advanced persistent threats and the explosion of cloud eroded that heavy perimeter in concept and in practice. The nodes on the same network segment can no longer implicitly trust each other. They need to verify first. Zero trust architecture assumes that you are always in an adversarial environment, and it treats all systems as untrusted until they can prove their identity via a mutually trusted source. For service-to-service traffic, this is largely achieved using mutual TLS authentication. The client and server both present their certificates for the other to verify against a trusted source. Sometimes those certificates will also be used to encrypt traffic, but that is optional. You can encrypt it via some other mechanism. A common implementation of this MTLS setup is through service meshes in a Kubernetes cluster, where you have sidecar proxies handling the MTLS and the authentication, and then a control plane that sits over it assisting with certificate management. Now that's just one example. ZTA can be achieved at multiple levels of the stack, including layer 7 and layer 4. One could even push it further down the stack so that things like switches, routers, and devices all need to authenticate to each other before they will pass traffic. When you're ready to examine solutions, I will say that the perspective of ZTA is not necessarily a new one, but it is being applied to new spheres, namely traditional data centers and your cloud environments. So when you evaluate how you want to implement ZTA, I'd recommend considering a few things. First, what are the clients and servers in your environment? Are they containers, virtual machines, SaaS services, or even people? Second, what identity providers are available and how much do you trust them? Are you running in a cloud with an IAM service? Or can you leverage something like Active Directory or Okta for identity? Next, how would you like to verify the identity of people and machines? Machines usually need a non-interactive way to achieve authentication, whereas people are at least a little more patient and can be interactive. How long is an identity trusted before you re-authenticate? Then that's going to be a trade-off between the lifetime of a token and the work and frequency of authentication. And lastly, what is your security posture and how stringent do you actually need to be? Are you a high-risk target? What type of data are you trying to protect? What other mitigation strategies are already in place today? Once you've answered some of those questions for yourself and your environment, you'll be well prepared to evaluate solutions that exist in the marketplace and select one that helps you achieve your goals. Now, it's important to remember that zero trust architecture is not a product. It's a practice and a design that can be implemented by using tools and products. Now, I want to know if you're using ZTA in your environment or you plan to in the near future. So please reach out and let me know. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. You can find me on Twitter at Ned1313 or on my website, nedinthecloud.com. Thanks for taking the time with me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event. Stay healthy, stay secure out there. Bye for now.
All right, great stuff, Ned. Thanks for that overview. It really got me thinking, and I see in the Q&A there, I got some of you thinking as well. Appreciate all those questions that have come in already. And to hear more from Ned, check him out on the web and YouTube at Ned in the Cloud and on Twitter at Ned1313. Now, before we get to our first session of the day, we do have a quick poll question for you. It's the first of many today, so we hope you'll get in the habit of submitting answers. It really helps us in our effort to know what information is helpful to you, both to shape future events as well as making this Megacast more valuable to you. So this one is about what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company. And the options there are, less than 6 months, between 6 months and a year, 1 to 2 years, and not sure. So the responses are rolling in. Really appreciate that. Probably the biggest group right now is not sure, but we've got a lot in the 6 to 12 month range and a lot in the 0 to 6 month range. So that's sort of where things are shaking out. So I'll just leave that up there for a couple more seconds. Give everybody a time to process that and think about it. All right, looks like the answers are sort of cementing in place, or the percentages are cementing in place, so we'll move on. Okay, and as promised, here's one more quick poll, and this one is about your identity. We're really wondering how you all think of yourselves. If somebody asked you to describe your role in your organization at a high level, how would you describe yourself? Tech, as in I work in tech, or is it IT or IT department, as in I'm in IT, or other? Let us know in the questions. Click on other, and then we'd love to see in the Q&A panel there how you think about your role, how you describe your role. It's one way to think about it is if you were telling an uncle at Thanksgiving, what do you do? That's always sort of the ultimate test of how you describe your job. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for filling out those 2 polls. We really do appreciate it. And now it's time for our very first presentation in this Megacast. And this session comes from CrowdStrike, and presenting for CrowdStrike is Nyreen Vadeswaran. He's Director of Product Marketing at CrowdStrike. So now I'm going to turn things over to Nireen.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. In today's session, we'll take a brief look at the key drivers for Zero Trust and the possible best practices to start or even continue your Zero Trust journey. I'm Naren Vaidishwaran, Director of Product Marketing for Zero Trust here at CrowdStrike. Zero Trust has been around for a while, but now has gained a lot of traction because of the changing dynamics in the threat landscape, coupled with remote work being the new normal. If you read the news, you always come across new attack techniques and how adversaries are innovating every day to gain access to your enterprise and to bring down businesses to steal data, as was evident with the recent attacks like Sunburst, ransomware, Log4j, NOPAC, you name it. And also not to mention the nation-state actors that are constantly improving their game by moving laterally across the organization undetected. In fact, the most recent global threat report from CrowdStrike highlights the fact that almost 2/3 of the attack were malware-free. Adversaries are finding newer ways to get inside organizations using valid accounts and BAOD devices and finding their way to access sensitive data and critical applications and eventually steal the data or encrypt the data for ransom. Also, the most recent Verizon data breach investigations report also revealed the fact that over 80% of the breaches involved the human element, which makes the adversaries go undetected within the enterprise. If you consider some of the most recent attacks, the most recent ransomware or supply chain attacks, and map the threats across a typical MITRE attack kill chain, the threat actors are not always starting from here, which is the initial access. That is, they are not always following the kill chain in a linear manner to get to the target and to accomplish their goals. For example, in the case of the recent Log4j attack, if the threat actor or adversary could gain access to valid accounts, let's say from a third-party contractor, it would take them only a few minutes to move laterally across the network and they gain access to the crown jewel. This means that your Zero Trust strategy should aim to achieve the broadest coverage and maximum adoption across the enterprise to effectively reduce the attack surface. So what is Zero Trust? In your organization, you have the end users, the applications, the devices that are trying to access your enterprise resource, which could be another application, systems, or data. And Zero Trust aims to maximize protection and reduce the attack surface by assuming that there is no implicit trust based on type, location of assets, the users using them, and the associated devices, and also by continually evaluating all accesses. In other words, you move the perimeter closer to the resources and enforce continuous validation, visibility, and orchestration, as opposed to protecting discrete network segments. Well, organizations like yours may understand the increasing need for Zero Trust, with the adversaries becoming innovative, as evident in the recent modern attacks like ransomware, supply chain, etc. And there is also the various government mandates like the most recent White House executive order. You will have to start your Zero Trust journey at some point. Well, according to Gartner, Zero Trust will be the starting point for security for 60% of the organizations. But here is the challenge. More than half of them will fail to realize the benefits. Why is that so? When operationalizing Zero Trust, you have to look at three important aspects. The first one is security coverage across your on-premises network and across multi-cloud infrastructure, your hybrid clouds, the BYOD, legacy systems and tools, and so on and so forth. The second one is the time to value. When your organization takes up the Zero Trust project, it should not run for years. You have probably already invested in a lot of tools over the years, and you look up to vendors to provide the improved time to value that could work with the existing infrastructure, your existing architecture, and also enhance the overall security posture of your organization. And the third one, while doing so, is to preserve the user experience. In fact, it should be improved as an overall result of Zero Trust implementation, not just for the end users in going about their work, but also for the security teams in detecting and stopping threats in a timely and a much more efficient manner. Of course, when we talk to customers and also from our surveys, we see that the ease of deployment, the ease of use, and the security coverage are the top factors for organizations when they choose a zero trust solution. So which zero trust framework should you choose? Forrester has ZTX framework, Gartner has Kata framework, and there is a NIST 800-207 framework. Fundamentally, the basis for these frameworks is to move security closer to the resource that is being protected and trust nothing in the process. NIST describes zero trust as a series of controls that flow between policy decision points, or PDPs, and the policy enforcement points, or PEPs, that determine whether a user or application can access another resource or application. And just to reiterate the core components to be noted here, the policy decision point and the policy enforcement points. And when the subject tries to access the enterprise resource, the access is granted based on the decision made by the PDP and enforcing the policy by the PEP on devices, identities, workloads, the data on endpoints, etc. The NIST 800-207 framework has been widely accepted both by public sector and private enterprises. There are 4 core principles required for today's cloud-first work anywhere environment. First one is behavioral data. It is critical to understand if the users are doing what they are supposed to do. A hacker can take over a legitimate credential and try to do things that the user isn't supposed to do. We have seen customers that were surprised to see service accounts doing interactive logins and domain controllers using RDP. Also, there could be a login using valid credentials from an unknown or unmanaged device. Is the user supposed to log in from this device? Maybe not. The second one is we have to limit the blast radius with segmentation and least privilege. That is limiting where the users can go and what can be accessed, probably with micro-segmentation or identity segmentation, and thereby reducing the attack surface. This is important to prevent modern attacks such as ransomware and supply chain and contain the lateral movement by adversaries across the organization. Third principle is to leverage as much data as possible, enriched with telemetry from users, devices, workloads, applications, and employ automation and orchestration to enable accurate real-time responses. More telemetry data and context adds to better accuracy and improved mean time to respond for your SOC teams. And the last but not the least, the continuous verification piece. This is one of the most difficult to accomplish, but very important to do. If you use VPN timeout or MFA authentication, how well can you define these limits without affecting the user experience? So all accesses must be continuously verified in real time based on both deterministic and dynamic risks. Now, with that background in mind, let me give you a simplified view of how CrowdStrike Zero Trust maps to NIST. So we have the subject that is trying to access your enterprise resource. We have the policy decision point in the cloud that decides on whether the access should be allowed or not, and enforces through the policy enforcement point on various entities like endpoints, workloads, identities, etc. So when we consider the policy decision point, access to resources is determined by the dynamic policies enriched with telemetry from various entities like the devices, identities, workloads, etc. The continuous user and device risk scores, the threat intel, and other policies like, for example, the Active Directory policies, and also signals from your tools like SIEM, SOAR, and also from various other identity providers. In essence, enabling continuous risk context to automate and orchestrate with high accuracy and in real time. CrowdStrike has a rich partner ecosystem to leverage the signals from your email security, microsegmentation, or other tools to provide the broadest coverage, the most frictionless approach, and a fast time to value in your zero trust journey. So coming to the important question, how do I start or continue the zero trust journey? As a first step in your journey, you need visibility into the attack path. You have your endpoints, identities, your identity stores, workloads, and data. And it's important to see like the adversary and unravel the entire attack as it moves across these entities, essentially across the kill chain. Endpoints could be managed by your enterprise, or it could be unmanaged. It could be from work from home devices or contractors. Also, you have these multi-cloud workloads and applications, and your users could be accessing these resources from multi-directory stores. Some of them could be privileged, some of them could be service accounts. So it's important to understand all of these from a single source of truth. Essentially, you should get visibility everywhere. The next step is mitigating threats in real time with high fidelity automation. Now that you have an understanding of your threat landscape, the attack path, and what the entities are up to, detecting and stopping breaches in real time is crucial in your zero trust journey. You will be looking at multiple things like your entities, like your users, identities, endpoints, workloads, and again, aligning with the NIST zero trust framework, you should incorporate behavior risks and segmentation to reduce the blast radius. The PDP could be enriched with telemetry from various entities like all your endpoints, identities, and so on, and also consume inbuilt threat intel or data from external sources to improve the security context. The third step is to optimize. So in the previous step, you benefit from zero trust if you are able to apply policies automatically and accurately based on security context and threat intel. It is also important to optimize the user experience with risk-based conditional access. And probably, maybe not every time a user genuinely wants to access an application to do his work. Why is this important? Possibilities are that the users may accept the prompt, the MFA prompt, when they are fatigued with too many notifications, when it could actually be a malicious attempt. So without even knowing that the user could allow access, the SOC teams will be dealing with multiple incidents of users inadvertently allowing accesses or trying to separate suspicious movements from genuine ones, and so on and so forth. So in the optimization phase, the goal should be to improve the overall user experience, improve detection and response times, and also increase the security coverage to protect legacy systems, tools, and also unmanaged devices. So with the most frictionless and adversary-focused approach, CrowdStrike makes it easy for your organization to operationalize zero trust without re-architecting the existing infrastructure and eventually avoiding expensive rip and replace. So in summary, the key takeaway is that zero trust is not about just securing the endpoints, just the identities or workloads in silos. It is a holistic defense in depth strategy that should also be scalable with measurable ROI for your organization. It should definitely not be a rip and replace strategy. If you have a strong endpoint protection or an identity protection strategy, then great. It's a good start because you would have covered one of the critical elements in your zero trust security strategy. The next step could be to expand visibility and security coverage to your workloads, data, etc. Identifying the immediate and the long-term requirements is critical in your zero trust initiatives. And this is where CrowdStrike can help. With the most frictionless and adversary-focused approach, CrowdStrike makes it super easy for organizations like yours to operationalize zero trust without re-architecting the existing infrastructure using a standards-based zero trust framework and avoiding expensive rip and replace. CrowdStrike enables frictionless zero trust for your organization by controlling access to applications and services and by protecting the movement of critical data based on full authentication visibility of the device and the user. You want to know whether your user is who they claim to be and automatically correlate the device posture before granting access to critical data and resources. CrowdStrike's cloud-native architecture delivers defense in depth with zero trust protection on your workloads, endpoints, identities, and data. And this is irrespective of whether your environment is on-premises, whether it's in the cloud, or whether it's multi-cloud hybrid, and irrespective of the underlying technology. And CrowdStrike is also able to expand the zero trust coverage by including and protecting unmanaged devices and legacy systems and tools. With CrowdStrike's threat intel and managed services, we can leverage our security experts to understand where you are today and help you start or even accelerate your zero trust journey. CrowdStrike Zero Trust accelerates operationalization of zero trust with reduced cost and complexity, and the most importantly, with frictionless user experience, resulting in increased productivity for end users, high SOC efficiency for security teams, and reduce support tickets for IT teams. I think we have a few minutes to take questions. Look forward to your questions in the chat window. Thank you.
Okay, great presentation. Dareen, are you ready for some questions?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, and while we see what questions we have here, I'll just, I've put up the poll question, so everybody, we appreciate your answers on what additional information you'd like from CrowdStrike, but let's get into those questions. The first one has to do with saying I'm already into Zero Trust and using microsegmentation. You mentioned about identity segmentation. And how does that work, and what are the benefits?
Absolutely. I think this is a great question. We have been getting this question from many of our customers as well. So essentially, you have already deployed microsegmentation. So essentially, you're using this technique to segregate and isolate segments to reduce the attack surface. That's a great thing. So you have essentially moved the perimeter closer to your resources, and security controls are applied at or near the individual host. But remember, more than 80% of the attacks are identity-based. So in identity segmentation, you restrict access to applications and resources based on the identities, wherever they are, actually. So these identities, again, could be human accounts, the service accounts, or programmatic accounts that carry most of the cases, which carry the maximum privileges, and also the dedicated privilege account. So to give you the gist of what identity segmentation is. So, for example, essentially based on identities, you are actually restricting access to specific systems. For example, if it is your finance server, you can define who can and cannot access your database servers or finance servers, and you can completely block access to your restricted environment like the card data environment, credit card servers, and so on and so forth. So if the access seems to come from a third party or a vendor, you can define the policy, a very simple policy in such a way that the access is blocked. Or if a valid account is being used from an unmanaged system, again, you can define very simple policies to block access to all these crown jewels, database servers, credit card servers, etc. So the identities can be anywhere, and the accesses can come from anywhere. And to enforce protection, this essentially shouldn't require you to know the data center architecture or the network topology on what has changed, what has been added, and so on and so forth. So essentially, identity segmentation is going to make your job easier in restricting access on stopping breaches.
Okay, super. You know, and there was a follow-up question from Kathy, you know, sort of about microsegmentation, but I think identity segmentation as well. Is there a best practice to rolling out these policies to the applications?
So first things first, so when it comes to identity segmentation, like I mentioned, it's the best practice is to first get a complete view of where your identities are, who they are, what they are supposed to, whether they are doing what they are supposed to do, and so on and so forth. And then there is a lot of behavior analytics that is happening in the background, and that will probably define the baseline. And based on the baselines, you can specify very specific policies, like if there is a deviation from user A, and if the user A's privilege is getting escalated to user B, trying to move laterally to a specific crown jewel application. So this is where you can specify what policies to apply based on the behavior, based on user risk, based on the device risk. So these are very simple, straightforward policies that are available out of the box, and you can just enforce the policies right away.
Okay, super. Next question, Tori is wondering if the Zero Trust framework that you were talking about in your presentation is CrowdStrike's sort of implementation, or if you were using sort of an industry standard, you know, framework or definition.
Yeah, so we are aligned with the NIST 800-207 industry framework that is being widely accepted by private and public sectors, and also the recent executive order, the White House executive order, to use NIST as the underlying technology as a framework.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and then as far as the NIST model goes, you know, how do people actually get started with zero trust? Say, you know, they know the NIST model, but you know, what's the level of complexity and costs that they're looking at if they have to plan this over the next year or two?
That's actually a great question, very important question, message. So where exactly are you in the zero trust strategy? That's the actual question. So whether are you in the planning, designing, or are you operationalizing zero trust at some point? So the next step is probably you may have to assess your existing scenario, like how robust or mature your endpoint, identity, or workload or application security strategies are. What is your policy decision point and where it is? Is it in the cloud? And probably think of a few other things like reorganizing the strategy on how we are going to get visibility from across all these entities. The goal should be to build a zero trust solution that unifies all the critical zero trust elements, that is your endpoints, workloads, data, and identities that I've been repeating all along. And then it starts with identifying the low-hanging fruits and the most vulnerable security areas in your organization. So just to give you a more elaborate answer, you could download the Zero Trust white paper, the streamlining the Zero Trust journey. That gives some very specific scenarios on how we can operationalize Zero Trust. So at the end of the day, it's like you have to start with asking where you are right now in the journey.
Okay, no, that's great. And that white paper is in your handout section. That's the first resource there from CrowdStrike, that PDF. So check that out. Great stuff. Well, Nyreen, I think we're up on time, but thank you so much for answering our questions here today and bringing us up to speed on CrowdStrike. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And now it's time for our prize drawing. The first one of the day, and the winner of the first $500 Amazon gift card is Tina Chisholm from Georgia. And the winner of our first grand prize, again, that's a Surface Laptop 4, is Chad Dam from North Dakota. So congratulations to Tina and to Chad. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes. And now it's time for the next presentation in the Zero Trust event, and our next session comes from Keeper. And presenting for Keeper is Randy Leipziger, who's a Principal Solutions Engineer with Keeper. Randy, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, let's just get right into it here. Let's see. Next slide one more time. There we go. All right, so today we're going to talk about Zero Trust platform here at Keeper Security, which is all our software is based on Zero Trust management. A little bit about Keeper. We've been around for a while. We were founded back in 2011. We are experts in enterprise management, encryption, privileged access control. We've had millions of countries all across the country. We are a leader in enterprise security technologies. We are definitely on top of our field for password management. Currently 4 offices around the world with our headquarters in Chicago. Company's always been profitable. We're backed by Insight. We're not going anywhere. We carry a lot of patents in our technology, the way we do things. Things are unique to Keeper. And we consistently see industry awards for the platform. Enough about us, onto the subject. Organizations are in a cyber war. We've kind of seen the first time in any of our lifetimes this cyber war going on between Russia and Ukraine, and it's a very, very interesting landscape if anybody's following it. Times certainly have changed, and we need to be prepared in how to deal with these types of challenges. This number is kind of concerning, right? 80% of breaches are due to weak passwords or just loose security controls around said passwords. That's if we could eliminate that, that's the bulk of the threats that are coming in through the door these days. And it's just not security IT department, right? It's everybody within the organization. It just takes one loose player to bring down the whole camp. The amount of credentials floating out there today, 20 billion credentials are floating around in the dark web. A lot of companies don't even have any insight to know if any of their data is out there. I found this slide particularly concerning, not so much about the cost per incident, but a little concerning to see technology and science so far up the stack. You think we ourselves could do a little better job than the folks we take care of, right? So I think IT as a whole, we really got to take a look at our methodology, who we're trusting, how we're distributing trust, and try to rein that back in a little to get a better control of our assets. Core problems. Organizations don't have any visibility into their password security or hygiene, right? Users have their end passwords, maybe they're doing it right and they've got them in an encrypted document or something of that nature. We really don't know how are they using these passwords. Is it the same password reused 100 times, or the password's 8 digits long? No visibility. We really have no way to tell what our end users are doing. Of the passwords that folks are using, are any of them compromised? Are they sitting in some hacker's dictionary getting run tonight? Well, again, we don't really know. There's no easy way to compare. You can compare as an end user each of your passwords, but very difficult to tell what the enterprise is doing. Commonly that leads to failed protected endpoints. Credentials and secrets are all over the place and leaked out. It's a little hard to tell exactly which bits of these data might have been leaked. So a solution to that is a centralized password management platform. At Keeper, we strive to have the most effective defense against this methodology. Again, this is where most malware attacks begin, is with some known password to get in the front door, and they start working their way up the stack to critical systems. We can provide that mission critical visibility into your infrastructure. And yet we still could retain that zero trust knowledge. What that means is you'll get an overview. We'll see in a few more slides. We can get an overview of somebody's security posture without actually seeing any of their data. We have the ability to lock down all these endpoints with zero trust security architecture. And we can make it a little easier to just manage the suite as a whole, as far as provisioning users on and off the platform, access control. All these types of things can come from another source that a lot of folks are already using. If you've got a good implementation in Active Directory or sitting out at Azure, we can link into that and put a lot of that management back in the AD side where you have to do it, and you don't need to go and repeat that work. On the Keeper side, make it a little easier to manage. And it certainly is going to improve the connectivity to the end users. As a result, the software itself makes it a little easier to get in and out of sites for productivity, and just the fact that the data is protected and we don't have to go through some type of disaster recovery procedure to recover lost data. So how we do this? Well, we've got the big wheel here of some of the things that we do. There's actually a bit missing here, but dark web monitoring, we have the ability to compare passwords against passwords in the dark web without actually knowing the password. That's done by hashing the known password and the password in question, anonymizing it, comparing those anonymized hashes. If they match, well, we know we've matched the password without actually knowing the data. High-end reporting available both within our console, as well as data could be forwarded to a centralized syslog collector. The ability to integrate with any major IDP provider. We work with all SAML 2.0 compliant providers. We have the ability to implement role-based access control, transfer control, as well as the ability to transfer vaults between one user and another, which is critical in the zero trust architecture. Part of zero trust is no password resets, right? So no one's trusting anyone to reset their passwords. We do need a backdoor to recover user data. Security file storage, right? We can store any type of file attachment that's needed into a vault, and that data can be shared across securely. A little note on how we do that. As we see this zero trust, zero encryption technology, and the way we go about it here at Keeper, all the data at rest in our database is encrypted. There's no way for us to decrypt the data because the end user holds that key. Either they hold that key as a result of a combination of their master password hash, or it's derived and stored on their endpoint device for systems like that are using single sign-on login. All data is encrypted at transfer. The only time data is ever decrypted is on the user's endpoint device. The way we do that, we're pretty open about how we do it. We go into the vault. At Keeper, we encrypt every individual record at the vault layer. I think that is still unique in the industry. Our competitors tend to encrypt the entire vault. In our case, if you have 1,000 records, you're going to have 1,000 unique 256-bit AES encryption keys for each individual record. We then wrap that key with the second key used for folder sharing. Record and folder keys are yet encrypted with another key. We have the ability to do the same thing for secrets, be they machine to machine as opposed to people, right? We have a secrets manager product that works with the same methodology. For users that are logging in with master password, we decrypt those keys based on their master password, right? So that's how we start unraveling the key stack. For folks that are using single sign-on, we've actually taken this a step further. We've moved from the older technology to elliptical curve cryptography, which is kind of the way the industry is slowly moving. We're hoping to have that in place for master password later this year. The advantage of elliptical key, it takes a lot of time to crack it. With the upcoming quantum computers, this is going to be really important in another 5 years or so. Sharing of secrets between users is also currently managed via elliptical key cryptography. There's multi-level encryption on all these records. All the groups are encrypted individually, allowing records to be shared between groups of people we call teams securely. Keeper is the most secure, certified, and tested audited platform on the market. We are SOC 2 compliant. We're ISO 27001 compliant. And it's only a couple of us out there that manage to do that. And it's a reach. Getting that compliancy with zero trust is it's some work. But it's been really good here at Keeper. No issues with that. How to sync in my passwords. Apologize. Let me back up one slide. So here's a quick kind of overview of the admin console. We can see here a general dashboard of all the events taking place on the platform for this particular organization. At the end of the day, this is an event-driven database at the back end. You have the ability to report on all the event types that occur. I think we have about 130 different event types now. Those events can be either triggered through our platform and sent out to an end user via an email, via a text. We even have the ability to hook into like a webhook if you wanted to forward it on to like OpenView or BMC Patrol or something like that to get it right in front of a NOC monitor. Absolutely doable. You could also forward all this information on to like a centralized SIM, like a Splunk solution, something of that nature if you wanted to centralize the output of that data. Slide. Well, here's a little bit of view of our audit panel. Now this is the administrative overview. Now, an end user with our product will have a very similar view here, except they're going to know exactly which of their records have these weak passwords, right, called out by title, so they know which ones to go address and try and harden. Now, we still have to consider zero trust, zero knowledge. As the administrator, we're not entitled to know the details of our users' data. However, we can get a synopsis upstream, and that's what we're seeing here. Like we know Sarah has, she's pretty good. She's only used 23 passwords. 12 are unique. The strength is good. She's using two-factor authentication. So we can get a really good stance of her security posture without ever actually exposing any of her data. We can do something very similar with dark web monitoring with our breach watch service, which, as I mentioned earlier, compares that data. It's a little out of order. Yeah, so here's the breach watch slide, and we're seeing the same type of thing. Again, at the end user view, they would have details which records are affected. As an administrator of the platform, we just know the individual users and how many records they have at risk. Now, there is the ability to kind of silence these at-risk alarms. Maybe you've got a alarm code that's a 4-digit PIN. It's always going to be vulnerable. The end user has a way to check that and clear it, so you as the upstream administrator at least know they've addressed these issues. Here's a little bit of view into our enforcement policies. We've got, I think at last count, a little over 80 unique enforcement policies, right? These are all the user-facing policies required for them to meet their company security posture. Things like master password complexity. How long are we going to allow them to use that password before they have to reset it? Two-factor authentication is available on our platform to all users by default, but it's not a requirement. Here's where you go in and configure it to be required, to force that user to use 2FA at every login. Maybe if it's two-factor authentic, if they're using single sign-on, they're already doing it out at their IDP. Maybe you only want to do it once a month, if at all. You have the ability to set all those type of individual things. The ability to, what biometric login methodologies are we going to use? To restrict certain platform restrictions, maybe sharing outside your company be a good one. We have a very powerful browser extension that plugs into all major browser platforms. It kind of is a link between the vault and getting the data into web platforms. Within the browser settings section, you can control all the individual settings that the end user has available to them. Probably most important, logout timer, right? How long are we going to allow them to stay logged in before re-authenticating? Are we going to allow it to auto-fill their credentials and auto-submit those credentials? You can control all that from policy if you want, or you can just let the user decide on their own. A couple other important ones here. Whitelist, right? We could tie everything, all the access down to whitelist. That would force users to like VPN into the office before they can even access their vaults. Not a bad idea for administrators. One at the bottom, transfer account. It's kind of unique to this zero trust, zero knowledge architecture. As I mentioned, we can't do password resets. Users do forget their passwords. They get locked off the platform. We have kind of a self-recovery methodology where they answer their own security question and answer. Hopefully they can recover their password and get back to work. In cases where they've forgotten both, they really are locked out of the platform for life. That's part of the security architecture. The workaround is this vault transfer. Works via a couple different policies, allows them to transfer a vault to a temp user, recreate the locked out user, and get their data back to them. Also super handy for offboarding. If somebody leaves the organization, you can retain that data within the org in case you find out you need it down the road. Sync here, back and forth. So the breach watch slide. All right, so this is another little view into the reporting module, what it can do. Again, we do have the most robust reporting industry, the most robust reporting module in the industry with, I think, about 130 events. And anything you can think of, be it somebody creating a record, opening a record, logging in, deleting data, moving data between their vaults. Again, any type of action that occurs, we can get that in a report, we can get that in an alert, we can get that sent out via a webhook. We also have a compliancy module, which unfortunately it's not in the slides, but we just added a couple of months ago a compliancy module. Right, zero trust, we've got this big challenge that say I share data with 3 other people and you want to see what data I've shared. Well, you can't. It's zero trust architecture. You're not allowed to see into that. Compliancy module kind of works around that by enabling it. The downside is you decrypt the title of the record. But once the titles are decrypted, now you can run reports, usage reports for a particular user, right? What resources has this user accessed in the past 30 days? Maybe the user is getting offboarded and we need to go and roll the credentials for every system they've accessed, or maybe you're just a bank and you need to audit what your folks are doing, what systems you're adding. That reporting helps a lot, and I believe we are the only folks with that type of reporting available today. And as I mentioned earlier, all this data can be forwarded on to any major SIM. We support syslog export. I should say we have a feed for syslog, encrypted syslog, or we could send it up via HTTP for one of the protocols that like Splunk or Sumo Logic's looking for. So our three core principles of all this. Just try to get my notes lined up here. Well, the safest thing is to assume a breach. Assume everybody's been breached. Assume that we can't trust anyone, which means that if we can't trust anybody, we do have to verify everybody explicitly. Sounds like a lot of overhead, but computers are great at authenticating, so it's not a big deal. These two aren't too tough to do. The last one is a little harder, right? Ensure least privilege access. Look like Microsoft Serve systems, they kind of take a different approach where there's a lot of services and everything's open on the box out of the box. As you look at a Unix box, it's more of a least privilege access, right? Everything's off, nothing is on. You stand up a Unix server, it can't do anything till you go in there and tell it, well, I want you to be a web server. Let's listen on the web server port. You know that only that single port's open. You have one attack vector. Right? We don't have 50 ports open and 50 ways people can get in. That is so critical, is dealing with this least privilege access control and really maintaining it. I mean, again, assume breach. Any human or device could be compromised, maybe even right now. Instead of implicitly trusting the device and everybody within the network perimeter, we really can't trust anything to stay secure. We need to verify explicitly. All humans and machines must prove who they are, what they are, before they can access resources on the network. And least privileges, once you're logged in, let's not expose anything else to them than what they actually need to get their job done. When organizations deploy Zero Trust properly, IT administrators have full visibility into all their users, system devices, people's apps. All the services can communicate simultaneously, securely, even across multiple network environments, with the risk of any type of past-related cyber attack greatly reduced. Next up, benefits of Zero Trust, right? Minimize attack surface. There's just less areas where they can get to you. Reduced risk of past-related cyber attacks because passwords are securely stored in their vault. One other big advantage of using a password manager, and I just had this with the customer the other day, that he was concerned that the user could read the password coming across the screen for the couple seconds it was up and they could memorize it. Well, think about it. If we're using a password manager, we can increase the length of our password to 99 characters if we want and have tremendous complexity. If you see a 20-character password go by that's truly complex, there's probably a few people in the world that could memorize that flying by. It's just too hard to recall. Use the tools that are there. Let Keeper encrypt, generate your passwords, because you'll never create a password more complex than the tool will do for you. Reduce the risk of privilege escalation. Again, somebody getting into these passwords allow them escalation in the environment. Risk of data exfiltration, keeping the password secure. Well, we can't get the data back out if we can't get in to get it. Support from compliance. As we mentioned, the compliance reporting really leads into what we're seeing in the industry moving forward. I think a lot more compliance reporting is going to be required by the government, at least here in the U.S., due to cyber attacks over the next few years. And it's just overall a far more secure data environment. Deploying Zero Trust in your organization. Well, where do we begin? As we saw in a slide earlier, it's 82% of these attacks are password related, so probably password security is a great place to start. It's going to give you the biggest bite out of the pie with the least amount of effort. Mind the gaps of things that we can't actually cover with password management, right? I mean, we can only cover so much, but there's things we can do to harden that, like role-based access. Two-factor authentication is one of the best things you can do to protect your access control on top of good password management. And back to what we said earlier, ensure least privilege access. this does have a need to commit ongoing administration, right? You got to stay on top of the stuff. However, as we talked about earlier, integration with the identity providers, close integration with Active Directory, we can take a lot of this day-to-day maintenance. For example, maybe group memberships. You've got somebody changing roles. You're going from, I don't know, networking to security. Move them out of the AD group and networking, move them to AD and security, and their passwords exposed to them could follow course on the back end of Keeper without any user intervention if you map your roles accordingly. So we've done a lot to try and reduce the administrative overhead for you guys. Keeper protects organization against cyber threat with zero trust and zero architect security, full visibility secure control of everything. Try it free is linked to Keeper security. We offer free trials for 14 days. All our trials are 100% active. No restrictions for usage. A couple other things probably worth mentioning here as they didn't make it to the slide deck. Password management has been our core since the business started. The past couple of years, we've tried to kind of fan out a bit. We're really moving into the secrets management space, which is pretty much what we've talked about, but for machine to machine as opposed for people to machine. So CI/CD pipeline would be a great example, or maybe you're building servers through automation and need to manage the secrets, keep the server up. All integrates with the exact same vault we saw here, just back-ended with some code instead of a graphical interface. And we're also working with a Keeper connection manager, which is a way to manage connections, like you do through RDP, back-ended by the vault, securely centralized managed through a web interface. All kind of folds into the same concept here of trying to really get really good access control methodology here. What information would you like about Keeper solutions? I guess this is to your side.
Yep. Yeah, that's what we leave up there during the Q&A portion, just for everybody to let us know what else they'd like to hear about from Keeper, as far as data sheets and technical white papers and stuff like that. But Randy, great presentation. Passwords have obviously become such a critical component of security. The user auditing and dark web monitoring stuff was that was really cool. I appreciate hearing about that. So yeah, let's get into some of the questions here from the audience. We had comments from Ronnie and Steve who talked about being existing users of Keeper and loving the product. So that kind of feedback is always nice to hear. Did want to ask, how does Keeper integrate with other security solutions like SSO, SIM, or MFA?
Excellent question. We do integrate with all those services. Historically, there's been a very large challenge of maintaining zero trust and doing a single sign-on integration without the client having to maintain some type of service on their side. Reason being, those endpoint keys have to be held by the customer. Up until about 18 months ago, we did require users to stand up a pair of servers. High availability is needed, right? It's critical service. That was the number one complaint about it. We then turned back and we actually have a complete web-based service. You can go into our admin console, set up a web-based single sign-on connector in about 5 minutes. I mean, the first time I take you 10, 15, second time through 5 minutes, and you're good to go. We supply the SSL cert and all that, all done. As far as integration for SAML, for the skim provisioning, it's just a couple URLs, just a few minutes. It's all back-ended through our console. All the config is done in our console, and over on the IDP side, we do support all 2.0 IDP providers like Okta, Ping Identity, Camel, Azure, what have you.
Okay, great. Yeah, we had a question from James. How would you compare your service offering to another vendor like Okta? And I love that question too, because I think it helps clarify what you guys do versus what Okta does, and sort of the line is and how you integrate.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Okta is an IDP. They are our number 2 IDP as far as the amount of connections we have connected out to IDP. And I think that's kind of their area. They really are trying to be an authentication service. We are not an authentication service. We are password management. That is all we do. And that's what our whole business is about. And that's where we spend all our time, making sure we can be the best password manager, enterprise password manager on the marketplace. Where Okta's focusing a lot more about their IDP solutions. Not that they don't have a decent password management product, But I'm sure if you went and compared the overall features of the two different products, we've got them beats, right, in various areas, because that is our fundamental technology here.
Gotcha. Next question is from Edward, who says we currently use Duo authentication passwords and text to your trusted mobile device. How would Zero Trust integrate with that Duo authentication?
Well, we do support Duo authentication. It is supported in our enterprise platform. So if you're using like Duo Push, absolutely supported on our side. And we can support the older like 6-digit PIN methodology as well.
Okay. And probably time for one more. How does Keeper differentiate from legacy password managers like, for example, like LastPass or things like that?
LastPass is certainly our nearest competitor. I think differentiations, and you're definitely getting the weeds because we are the top two out there. I really believe that our management console is far easier to use. If you go into LastPass, you're kind of looking all over to find administrative settings. Well, kind of like we saw the slide easier. If you need to go set user-facing settings for their security posture, it's all in one place. It's very, very centrally managed. We also, I believe, are still the only ones on the market that's able to truly retain Zero Trust architecture with the SSO connector. Most other competitors have that there, but it actually compromises with the connector as where we don't. And I think those are the couple big things to delineate. I know there's a couple big differences in licensing and cost modeling between us, but not particularly applicable, I suppose, to this call.
Okay, super. Well, Randy, we're just about up on time, but we're a ton of questions that we just didn't get a chance to get to here. I know you're a busy guy, but if you have an opportunity to stick around in the chat at all after your session, I'm sure people would love to hear back from you.
Absolutely.
But yeah, well, thanks so much for being here and bringing us up to speed on Keeper.
Thank you for having us.
And now it's time for our next $500 gift card drawing. And the winner of this Amazon gift card is Peter Troutman from Ohio. So congratulations to Peter. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes, or your prize, I should say. And now it's time for our next presentation in the Zero Trust Security Megacast. And our next session comes from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and AMD. And presenting for HPE is Aaron Taylor. He works for HPE as the HPE North America AMD Alliance Manager. So I'm going to turn things over to Aaron.
Thanks, Scott. And as mentioned earlier, I am Aaron Taylor. I am the AMD North America Alliance Manager here at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I own the HPE AMD relationship for North America. And today we're going to talk about how HPE and AMD bring their technology together to create a better together security story to really help avoid security breaches for organizations and help make data centers more secure around the world. So the state of cybersecurity today, of organizations, about 80% of them rank cyber risks as a top 5 concern for their company. And cybercrime is expected to grow about 15% year over year over the next 5 years. So as we can see, not only is it a top concern for companies, but that top concern is only growing. Statistics show that ransomware costs the world economy $20 billion in 2021. And we expect that number to grow moving forward as criminals have become more intelligent about the way that they are going to commit crimes. No longer are you seeing people having to break into banks to get your money. They can do it from their fingertips in their home through cyber breaches, ransomware attacks, and a plethora of other security concerns that can affect both you and organizations worldwide. So how do we defend against these attacks? The concept of zero trust security is the new buzz in the industry, and zero trust means trust nothing, continuously verifying everything. So the traditional data center works as that you have a firewall around your network, and that from the outside in, there is a check to make sure that nothing can get inside. But what happens once it gets inside? Data can transverse from server to server, from storage arrays across different servers and across different networks, depending on how traffic transverses through your data center and depending on how complicated your network may be. Once inside, you don't know what someone could get a hold of or what data may be vulnerable to an attack. So the concept of zero trust security starts at the hardware within the silicon. We view the silicon itself as the base of the data center, and really you want to build out from the smallest component. And within that silicon, you have building on top of that firmware and drivers to talk to operating systems and different piece parts within the servers, operating systems, and then applications where you're actually running your data. And that's all inside that firewall. So multiple different applications may be able to communicate with inside that firewall. So with zero trust, what you want to do is continuously check and continuously verify that there are no bad acting agents within the firewall already, or there's no attack coming from the inside. So from the edge deployment to the cloud deployments, you want to make sure that everything's verified, every packet's checked, and everything that's deployed is safe and secure. So how does HP and AMD bring their technology together to help make us do that? So at HPE, we brought out with Gen 10 what we call our silicon root of trust. The silicon root of trust is an immutable fingerprint built on top of the ILO 5 chip that was introduced in our Generation 10 servers. That is continued with Generation Gen 10 Plus and the Gen 10 Plus V2 servers. The silicon root of trust is built on top of the hardware, and it does a firmware and driver and BIOS check on the actual servers themselves. We check the actual silicon built into the motherboard of your servers. With AMD's secure processor, you have two main concepts. Not only is it doing a processor root check and checking the BIOS, it is also has a secure encrypt virtualization, being able to encrypt at your virtualization environment, and secure memory encryption. Secure encrypt virtualization helps isolate virtual machines from each other within the hypervisor layer, making sure that you can isolate extremely sensitive data from VM to VM and make sure that there's no creep of data between virtual machines on the same server. Secure memory encryption also helps you encrypt the memory so that if a bad agent tried to pull any data off memory, either running or turned off, secure memory encryption helps cryptographically encrypt that data so it would just be mush if someone tried to steal data from you. Adding these together, HP and AMD work together and in sync between the silicon root of trust and the AMD secure processor to do checks from the silicon, as we mentioned earlier, all the way up to the virtualization layer. So from the very core of your data center, HP and AMD create the most secure server in the world. So what part of our platforms do we have HP and AMD's security on? The HP and AMD portfolio spans many different markets that HP has, from the SMB to mid-market all the way to the world's largest supercomputer. So in the SMB, you can see here clearly we have the DL325 and the DL385 Gen 10 Plus. The DL325 is a 1U, 1P box, and the DL385 Gen 10 Plus is a 2U, 2P box. As we move forward in generations and we brought out new processor lines from AMD, we have the DL325 Gen 10 Plus V2. That is the next generation Milan processors from AMD, which is currently their most up-to-date processor line. The Rome processors are the ones in the Gen 10 Plus versions. You can see in the enterprise and commercial space, that encompasses the DL325 as well as the DL325 Gen 10 Plus V2, the DL345, which is a 2U 1P box. This box is specifically made for software-defined workloads. The DL385 and the DL385 Gen 10 Plus V2, those are 2U 2P boxes that can run any type of workload that you can think of. And of course, the DL385, this is an extremely dense server line that is 1U 2P. As we move into the HPC and supercomputing space, we have our Apollo lines. The Apollo 2000 is a 1U 2-processor, half-width box that can fit 4 servers in 2U of space in the rack, so really can consolidate your data center space. The Apollo 6500 allows you to do intense HPC workloads, and the HPE's recent acquisition of Cray supercomputers actually runs the largest supercomputers in the world. So the world's largest supercomputer is actually HPE AMD, and it is extremely secure. So from the SMB mid-market all the way to HPC and supercomputing, you can have the world's most secure servers in your data center. But we don't just stop at what's in your data center. We do this from cradle to grave, from trusted supply chain, which we'll talk about in a second, all the way to the retirement of your IT environment. HPE really does the entire life cycle of your IT equipment. The secure supply chain helps make sure that your equipment gets to you safe and secure, that you are the only one that's able to access your data. And then from the retirement of your IT equipment, once you're done and you need to retire and recycle that IT equipment, HPE offers IT retirement services that help make sure that there's security once you dispose of your IT equipment. So we talked about we're getting into HPE's secure supply chain. So what are we doing in the secure supply chain that really differentiates us? Well, we do check the devices from their inception. So there's a platform certificate that is created and additionally signed at HPE's manufacturing sites. So when the server is actually made and manufactured, we do a platform certificate that is created and it's stored on the server. We then make sure that the customer receiving the equipment has that certificate so that they can verify only they are the ones accessing anything on that server, from the silicon, as we talked about earlier, to the firmware and drivers on the server. You make sure that you are the only one that has access to that data, all the way from the inception of the server. And we also offer a built in the USA option. So with HPE, we are the only major server manufacturer to offer an assembled in the USA option for your industry standard servers with the Silicon Root of Trust. Building HPE and AMD on top of that helps us secure from your firmware, your drivers, your BIOS settings, and also your virtualization environment. So from top to bottom within that server, you are secure and you are the securest platform that you can buy in the industry today. From the supply chain all the way to the end of the life cycle of your servers, HPE and AMD bring the most secure platform in the world. A couple of different parts to learn more. We have videos online that help protect your data with HPE and AMD. All security is not the same. We have blogs that you can go check out and read just about how HPE and the Silicon Root of Trust works down to a minute level, and also how HPE and AMD work together with the secure processor and the Silicon Root of Trust. And of course, solution briefs, white paper dockets, and more security software that you can put on top of HPE and AMD. So there's many more different content out there. Just feel free to reach out if you want to learn more, or feel free to search for yourself. And with that, I think we can open it up to questions.
All right. Great presentation, Aaron. Are you ready for some questions?
I'm ready, Scott.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, and while we see what questions we have here, I'll just put up the poll question, and again, we appreciate everyone's answers on what additional information you'd like from HPE and AMD. But yeah, let's get into some of those questions. So Aaron, how often are you hearing security being brought up in your day-to-day conversations with customers when discussing HPE's portfolio?
Yeah, we're hearing it more and more every day. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, about 80% of organizations rank cyber risk as one of their top 5 concerns as they work to define and build out their IT environment. The strategic approach that they need to take to cybersecurity that is zero trust is becoming more of a standard across customers rather than just a luxury. The days of physical copies that we can hold to our chest are fading, And virtual security is just as important as physical security, and customers are needing to invest in it now.
Interesting. So is there a cost associated with the security features that you've mentioned with HPE Gen 10 technology and the AMD Secure Processor?
Great question, and no, there's no cost associated. HPE Silicon Root of Trust is built into every ILO 5 chip that we make in our Gen 10 servers. AMD Secure Processor is also built into their processors and every single one of their processors. And with a secure processor, you do actually have to turn the features on, but they're built in automatically, so you can use them if you want to. But with HPE's ILO 5 chip, the Silicon Root of Trust is innately built in and on.
Okay. So a lot of this is sort of hardware security. What are some of the types of attacks that come in that way? That might be different from things that come in through software or through cloud. Like what kind of stuff are you especially defending against with
anything to do with corrupted firmware drivers. A lot of times when you load like a driver set for an operating system, you could download something that has corruption in it, which could be a breach in your security that can actually happen from an employee rather than someone maliciously attacking you. Denial of service attacks where they jam up your network can also get down to the server level or the hypervisor level. So there's many different types of attacks and things you need to defend against, not just at the software level, but down uniquely within firmware, drivers, BIOS settings, processors, memory. So there's a lot of things when you look at just hardware that you need to protect against, as that's really your base layer of the data center.
Okay, gotcha. So let's pivot a little bit to those platform certificates that you mentioned. What is that certificate exactly that's digitally signed at the HPE manufacturing sites?
Yeah, it's a X.905 certificate, and that's a public key infrastructure certificate. So it's digitally bound to the server's trusted platform module endorsement key. And its purpose is to protect against physical tampering as well. So if someone actually got into a manufacturing site or a supply chain site or even really a data center once the server arrives at the customer site, it can protect against physical tampering, malicious bootkits if someone puts a USB stick in the server, or any type of data theft for that matter that could happen from the inception of the server to when it's actually running in the data center.
Okay, gotcha. There's a question from Melania who's asking, what OS do you recommend that's more robust and secure for your portfolio?
So we really support a plethora of OSs. We have online, you can actually look up what we call quick specs. That will show the supported OSs for each different server generation. So depending on the generation, there will be a support list of operating systems. Any of those operating systems that are listed in our support list are as robust and can take advantage of any of the security features. And that's because all of the security features of the Gen 10 server are built on the ILO 5 chip, which is an out-of-bound network. So it's not on your production network. It's on a specific management network that offers the security outside of what you would run production traffic in. So it separates that completely. So it wouldn't necessarily be tied to an operating system. It would be tied to the hardware itself.
That's really cool. Okay. Question here from Rong, who's wondering, so we talked a little bit about the cost, and it was basically there was no additional cost on the security features. Rong is wondering how much zero trust architecture adds to the computing overhead, overall.
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, so I'm glad that you asked. It doesn't. As I mentioned earlier in the previous question, we built our security on the ILO 5 chip, which is an out-of-bound chip on the out-of-bound network. So it doesn't actually offer anything for the overhead computing at all. It's fully run on the ILO 5 chip. Now, the ILO 5 chip interacts with the different hardware, such as the processor, memory, PCI boards, etc. But that specific operation runs on the ILO 5 chip, which is pre-built in, separate from your production traffic, so there'll be no overhead on that. It's a great question.
Okay, super. Nelson is chiming in saying HPE rules, so that's a nice little high five there. Kathy is said, you mentioned retiring services. Does this include sanitizing the server before recycle?
Yes. So part of our Point Next services, they will come sanitize the servers, sanitize the drives. It's complete secure retirement of your IT environment. So complete sanitization of every piece of your hardware equipment.
Okay, super. Jeremy's wondering why choose HPE versus competition like, for example, Dell?
Great question. The unique thing that HPE does is the ILO 5 chip. So a lot of our competition relies on the secure processor from AMD and the secure boot from Intel. So they rely on the technology of the processor vendors to do full security. And while those are robust, HPE takes it a step further with our silicon root of trust and the ILO 5 chip in making out-of-bounds security on the hardware itself that happens and really protects against pre-boot type breaches. So for the processor to work with their security features, you have to boot the server up first. With ILO 5, it actually runs on aux power. So as soon as you plug in the power cords for the server, ILO is running whether the server is running or not. So you can reach the ILO immediately. The silicon root of trust will help detect anything that's either preloaded on your server that happens to be malicious or any type of post or pre-boot attack. So we take it a step further. We also have the ability to roll back if any denial of service attacks happen, so you can roll back to the last known good state. So we take it a step further than what our competition actually has in their offerings.
Okay, very cool. What types of security software do you have reference architectures for?
Yeah, we have a good bit of reference architecture. So I'll focus on one, but you can find any of our reference architectures on our HPE website. We have security specifically. The one I'm going to focus on is we have one with Tiger Graph for accelerated graph analytics, which is optimized for fraud analytics, which is a really important piece of tech for the financial industry. The reference architecture is based on the DL385, the Gen 10 plus V2 that you saw on the slides earlier, using Xilinx accelerator cards, which is a company AMD recently acquired as well. So adding more AMD into that mix. It's a great 20 to 25 page document that goes through the architecture and design principles and lays out some of the cool advantages both HPE and AMD with the processor and the Xilinx card are bringing to the table.
Okay. Another question here. Were AMD and HPE hit by the cyber breaches like Spectre and Meltdown that we heard about a couple of years ago?
Yeah, great question. Hopefully most of the people on the line remember those big breaches that hit the industry and the types of disruption it caused. With the HPE AMD portfolio, the servers I showed on the slide today, none of them were actually affected by the cyber attacks. And we take great pride in that, both jointly from an HPE and AMD perspective. The partnership and commitment that we have to cybersecurity from HP and AMD not only gives peace of mind to businesses as they run their applications on our infrastructure, it also helps them avoid the process of going server by server and doing security patches, which can be a tedious task. We've actually heard that sometimes there can be performance hits when you make these patches. And so being able to save the time for our customers and also let them keep optimized performance on our equipment really keeps us happy and it keeps the customers happy.
Okay. Well, we're almost up on time here. Just curious, what server in your portfolio is the most popular?
Yeah, great question. I think it, mostly depends on the workload and what the customer is trying to accomplish, but probably the DL325 Gen 10 plus V2 can really run 80 to 90% of every workload at an extremely effective cost per performance. That coupled in with the security features we spoke about today really make the solution that fits nearly every business. So if I were to pick one in general, it'd probably be that one. For more targeted workloads, both HP and AMD do really well in HPC space and supercomputing, and we mentioned those earlier. We actually just launched the largest supercomputer in the world, Frontier, so it's an HP AMD solution. The Frontier supercomputer runs at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and it's managed by the U.S. government. So speaking of, security, as we talked about today, it's very important to the guys of the U.S. government, and I think that really speaks for itself and our capabilities that we bring to the table.
Oak Ridge, that's a heck of a stress test. That's impressive. All right. Well, yeah. All right. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for being on and for the presentation and for all of your insights here in the Q&A. Really appreciate the update on HPE and AMD and the alliance.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, let's do another round of prizes. We've got another $500 Amazon gift card on tap. The winner of this gift card is Krishna Reddy Yanika of Virginia. And let's give away our second Surface Laptop 4 grand prize. The person winning this Microsoft laptop is Cameron Covey of Oklahoma. So congratulations to Krishna and Cameron. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes. And this is a great place to remind everybody just about that $50 Amazon gift card for the best question. The questions have been rolling in, throughout the sessions today. Keep it up. We have 7 sessions today, which means we're giving away 7 of these cards. We're picking a best question for every session that we do, so don't be shy. Ask that question that's on your mind, and as an added bonus, you could come away with not just new knowledge on that question that you really needed the answer to, but also $50 to spend at Amazon. And now it's time for our next presentation in our Zero Trust event. And our next session comes from Axis. And presenting for Axis is Jay Tilson, Director of Strategy. Jay, welcome to the Megacast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Glad you could be here. Yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this event. I was just going to give a little bit of background on me before we get started. So my name is Jay Tilson, and I'm the Director of Strategy at Axis. I've only been with Axis for about 4 months now, having moved over from spending 25 plus or so years on the customer side of the fence. I worked for several large global enterprises. I had various roles there, managed teams globally, covering things like infrastructure, mergers and acquisitions, architecture, and security. My first ever job actually was working for a games company called ID Software, if anyone's heard of them, and I got to play games for a living. But actually it was really good getting to a real good understanding of networking whilst I was there. Then I moved on and I worked for a Japanese-based manufacturer for about 10 years. I got to live in Japan and Denmark, and the company was really acquisitional. So I did a lot of acquisition deals, a lot of due diligence, a lot of integration type projects. I then spent a few years actually working for a Formula One team as trackside system support. That was a job I took really because I was really passionate about Formula One, and it was something I really wanted to do before I took on my next role. And then I went on to work for the global manufacturer that I was working for before I joined Axis. I was there for about 12 years or so. I was hired by them really because of my global experience, having lived in Japan, lived in Denmark, lived in Italy, lived throughout Europe. You can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the UK. We did things like global migrations to Active Directory, email migrations before moving everything to the cloud, and then really starting down the Zero Trust journey, which is then when I started at Axis. So today, I'm here to talk about making Zero Trust possible using SSE, Security Services Edge. Here at Axis, we believe that the modern workplace is an orchestra composed of users, devices, applications, and clouds, each playing their own tune, constantly syncing and constantly changing. The orchestra is really difficult to secure, it's challenging to see, it's very complex, and it extends far beyond the confines of what we used to class as the corporate network. It requires a solution designed to harmonize workplace connectivity. So over the last few years, we've seen a mega shift in our environment in both IT and security. Ever since the pandemic came along, things have really started to move forward. Although companies have already started to move applications out to the cloud, it's felt that this has increased significantly over the last few years. Applications, devices, and users are now more often than not outside of that corporate network that we remember, outside of that castle and moat design that everyone is so familiar with. Users really want to connect from anywhere at any time, and data is now everywhere, in cloud-based systems, on premises. It's all over the globe. You can access it pretty much from anywhere. In parallel to this shift, obviously, we've seen a huge increase in cyber attacks, with ransomware increasing over 500% since the start of the pandemic, and a lot more cyber attacks happening. This has led people like us to crave more and more visibility about the things such as the flow of data, user experience. Because really, if you can't see what things are happening, then you've got no chance of stopping the bad things from happening. So this is where we believe Zero Trust steps in. Zero Trust is a framework that recommends that no user, device, network, or application should ever be inherently trusted. By ensuring this is the default setting, all the businesses out there can better secure access and implement more granular access policies. Here at Access, Zero Trust is at the core of everything we do, and we actually believe it's something that all organizations should be striving for. However, we believe that Zero Trust is just the starting foundation, and at some point, trust does need to be established, and this is what we call adaptive trust. Adaptive trust is built on that Zero Trust framework. Trust is never inherently granted, but it must be established in order to keep the business operating. Trust is therefore earned based on contextual elements like identity, device policy, application, and the data being accessed. Adaptive trust is made up of 5 core elements. The first element is identity. This is the place we believe everything should start. You should really establish identity with an IDP such as Okta, Ping, Azure, or anything else you wish to use. And if that identity changes, so should the level of access. The next element of the 5 is device. You should ensure all devices reach the security posture requirements of your business. And if that posture changes for any reason, access should automatically be adjusted or even removed. You should be able to verify things such as operating system, is it a Mac, is it Windows, geographic location, i.e. where is the user connecting from, the patch or OS level of a machine. For instance, you may want to ensure that certain patches are installed before someone can connect. Or even things such as an EDR running, like CrowdStrike or Defender. Is it running? Is it updated? Not just installed, but is it actually running? All of these elements should be considered before you give access to resources. The third element is policy. You should be able to configure least privilege access at scale, and any policy changes should be in effect immediately to minimize any security gaps. You should not need to wait hours or days for policies to be changed. They should be instantaneous. A single policy across all services is also critical to reduce any complexity. Nobody wants to be configuring policies across multiple services. That really complicates things. Next out of the 5 is application. Trust should be adapted depending on the application being accessed. For example, context matters much more when you're accessing private applications versus accessing the internet. You should also be able to easily discover applications in use and define them using policies, and also have a holistic port and protocol support. Lastly is data. You should be able to control and have visibility of the flow of data to and from users and applications, and adjust this access quickly and easily. For example, you may want a user to be able to upload or download data to corporate services like OneDrive or Teams or SharePoint, but you do not want them to take the same document and upload that to a private system such as Dropbox. You may also want, if they are using an agent, to be able to download documents and upload documents. But if they are logging in from a machine without an agent, maybe you do not want that to happen. Maybe you want that to be blocked. Gartner also noticed the same mega shift as everyone else has. They created their SASE framework in 2019, but then they changed it in 2021, and they split off WAN Edge Services that you see on the left of the diagram and Security Services Edge, SSE, on the right-hand side of the diagram. Many people believe this was because they felt that the SD-WAN became less of a priority because users were no longer in offices and they were remote. Security Services Edge, SSE, is made up of some core security functions, such as your secure web gateway, cloud access security broker, and zero trust network access. Our aim here at Axis is to help you enable this new work from home atmosphere. Using our cloud-delivered architecture, you can securely connect your employees and third parties or any contractors to business applications, no matter where those business applications exist. You will be able to elevate visibility so that your IT and security teams can easily and exactly see what the users are accessing. They will even be able to monitor to ensure users get the best possible experience. We help you accomplish this by automatically mediating access at scale. There are no pass-through firewalls or VPN connections, and this is the key to zero trust. The user is connecting directly to an application and not to the network. We then automatically validate access based on policy and context, as I said before, such as user's identity, device posture, specific application they want to access, OS level, or even geographical location. A one-to-one connection is then brokered and between the specific resource and the authorized user, and we constantly inspect traffic and authorize activities throughout the session. There are only outbound connections, no inbound connections. The users are never put on the network, and therefore we minimize the attack service and prevent any lateral movement. So this is Atmos by Axis, a seamless security services edge platform. Our vision is a modern workplace powered by connectivity that is always in sync with your business. We are committed to enabling a world where access to any business resource from anywhere by anyone can be simple, safe, and reliable. You may ask what's different about about Atmos. Our platform is characterized by three core differentiators. It's super simple, it's super smart, and it's super secure. First, they're super simple. We minimize complexity by helping you direct the orchestra of users and applications from a single pane of glass. There is only one UI across the whole of the platform for private apps, SaaS apps, and internet access. And it's all sat on top of a single data lake offering visibility across the whole platform. The elegant policy tagging system allows you to easily create policies within minutes, and we can support both managed and unmanaged devices with agent and agentless offerings. Atmos is 100% cloud-based. It runs on the backbone of services like AWS Global Accelerator, making access to applications, no matter where they are, extremely fast and reliable. Next is super smart. I believe smarter is cooler. We allow you to auto-sync with the environment through a cybersecurity mesh of IDP and endpoint services, which are used to auto-tune policies and efficiently and fluently adapt access rights. You'll be able to react faster to user experience issues with visibility across users, endpoints, and connectors, all in that single data lake. The solution automatically detects captive portals, such as those you would find if you're logging in from a coffee shop or a hotel or the airport, automatically pulls in whilst you authenticate before resuming. Also, a user's device is connected to multiple POPs, and this is critical because at any one time, a user is connected to all of those POPs, and therefore traffic is automatically routed to the best location for access, the best location based on latency. Then there is super secure. We make security omnipresent. Regardless of how and where users are working, we help you inspect traffic to elevate visibility and prevent ransomware. I talked about this at the start of this call. Ransomware and cyber attacks have increased 500% since the start of the pandemic, and that will only continue to increase. So you are able to protect against data leakage and both detect and respond quickly to any cyber attacks and minimize the blast radius. Additionally, if a user group or posture changes for any reason, the platform will automatically terminate the connection. We also have the ability to automatically discover shadow IT applications, as well as control and inspect the flow of data with or without the agent. This is key to visibility and being able to see what users are doing throughout the connectivity. So you may ask, how does this all work? There are 5 key steps. The first step is that the user requests access to an application, whether the application is on-premise or in the cloud. Step 2 is that access mediates the initial connection, and this is the key to zero trust. As I said before, there are no pass-through connections allowed. The user is never put on the network. It's application to user connectivity, port and protocol, no network connection. In step 3, we verify the identity of the user and then validate access based on the policies I discussed. This is based on identity, device health, application type, user location, and you can also use multi-factor authentication to connect the user. Step 4. The service then brokers a one-to-one outbound connection, and that is key. The connection is outbound between a specific resource and the user. There is no network connectivity, and because it's outbound, you do not need to publish anything to the internet, and therefore your attack surface is significantly reduced. This is very different than legacy VPN solutions. Access inspects the traffic throughout the session consistently, and it terminates access if anything changes. If a posture changes, a group permission changes, it terminates it within 60 seconds. And this is Atmos by Axis. Here are some of the things that our customers are saying about us. Customers love how quickly the platform is to set up, how easy it is to manage, how everything's in one single UI and one data lake, and how they can have visibility across all elements of the platform. That's it for me today. I'm open to answer any questions that you have.
All right, super. Well, Jay, I've just got to say, speaking for anyone on the call who's as big a fan of the Wolfenstein, Doom, and Quake franchises as I am, I've got to ask, what were the big titles at ID Software during your time there?
Well, actually, I got the job because of Quake. So whilst I was at university, Quake was released, and I played it a lot at university, probably more so than I should. I played it more than I did any work. And my interview for the support company was actually a 32-player deathmatch of Quake, and the top 3 people got a job. The top 3 people got a job automatically, and then anyone in the top 10 had an interview. I came first. Luckily, I was quite good at it. and I got the job. I then went on actually to run a Quake kind of league in the UK, and I really wanted to go into professional gaming, and my mum talked me out of it and said it would be a silly career, and I constantly have reminded her over 25 years maybe how much money I could have made.
All right. And while we see what additional questions we have here, I'll just put up the poll question about additional information that everybody would like from Axis. But yeah, let's get into some of the questions. What's the difference from zero trust and adaptive trust from a management perspective?
Well, this is a really good question. I guess zero trust is like the gate. It stops people from coming in without approval. But the gate is the only checkpoint that verifies identity. Adaptive trust is the security guard that follows you around. One wrong move and you're going to get chucked out. This is the protection goes beyond that initial gate and determines what level of access you should have at any point in time based on context. From a management perspective, I guess this is simple to implement. You're not having to keep 24/7 watch. You simply establish the parameters of who is authorized for access, what device posture is acceptable for what user. And once you set up an SSE platform, it's the enforcer of adaptive trust measures. I really like that question because a lot of people ask what is the difference between zero trust and adaptive trust. And so it's a really good question.
Okay, super. Hey, we have a question here from TJ who's wondering, can Axis support legacy or bespoke applications that don't have RBA baked in?
Yeah, so we support, so the history of Axis was it started out as an agentless product. Our co-founders interviewed a number of CISOs and they came up with the issue really in the industry being third-party and contractor access. So it started off as an agentless offering before it became agent and then SSE. So we actually have a wide range of agentless access, and we do all ports and protocols with our agent. But agentlessly, we support RDP, SSH, Git, VNC, and we support all ports and protocols, even VoIP, ICMP, and AS400 with our agent. So actually, it's a huge differentiator for us, the amount of agentless access kind of things we can offer, as well as we're peer-to-peer. So you can do server to client and client to server, and most SSE vendors can't do that.
Okay. All right, super. There's a question here. Based on the Gartner SSE framework, there are quite a few products that are consolidated into one. Does this impact speed in which you ramp up a platform like this?
Yeah, our goal was to make SSE simple, smart, and secure, as I said before. So while SSE provides a wide breadth of ability, teams also have the flexibility to start where they have the greatest need. Many people are starting their SSE journey with ZTNA. They want to secure areas of highest risk first. So I also run the SSE forum for anyone that's interested, and on that we quite often discuss kind of where people should start their journey. A lot of other vendors out there in the SSE world have started in specific places. They started maybe with a CASB or with a ZTNA. We started from the ground up and have built our platform out, and we haven't gone out and acquired or designed separate solutions and bolted them together. That's why I say that everything is in one single pane of glass, one UI, because we built from the ground up, and we believe that's the best way of doing it. I think IDP is pretty essential. Is kind of you need an IDP before you kind of start that journey, and once you have an IDP in place, then ZTNA tends to be kind of the low-hanging fruit. And I believe, based on the conversations I've had, that's because many people still are working in industries where they have flexible working allowed. So there are still a lot of people working either at home all the time or flexibly or hybrid, and therefore legacy VPNs just don't cut it anymore in the world we're in. So replacing your kind of legacy VPN with a ZTNA solution is a good place to start, and it's relatively siloed. You can kind of change that without changing anything else. You don't need to get into all the other things that SSE brings along. Obviously, we offer a platform that does it all. We believe we've got strengths in all areas. But like I said before, we started agentlessly, built an agent, so ZTNA is really our powerhouse, and then everything comes after that.
All right, super. Well, Jay, we've got a ton of questions here in the Q&A. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get to all of them. If you do have an opportunity to stick around a little bit and answer any questions in chat, we would all appreciate it. But it's been great talking to you. Any tips for anybody who wants to get started with Access or find out more? What do you recommend?
I think it's probably worth having a review. I mean, the hardest. In fact, I interviewed John Kindervag only a few weeks ago now for the SSE forum, and we were talking about where to start Zero Trust. And he said, doesn't matter where you start, as long as you start. There are so many businesses out there thinking about starting, but not actually doing anything. And those are, unfortunately, probably going to be the ones that get compromised. So I would definitely try to understand what are your crown jewels, what are the things you're trying to protect, and then go down that journey. Certainly, if you're starting with Access, which I hope you do, have a look at our website, do some research. You can either reach out to me, you can reach out to anyone in the business, you can drop us a note. We're quite happy to answer questions, and I will hang around after and answer any questions that have come in. But certainly, look at our website and see what we do, and feel free to reach out.
All right. Well, Jay, it's been great talking to you. Thanks again for being here and bringing us up to speed on Access security.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great. Thank you.
And now it's time for another round of prizes. We have the winner of the next $500 Amazon gift card, and that is Richard Cook from Indiana. And the winner of our grand prize, Surface Laptop 4, for this one is Carla Ness from Texas. So congratulations to Richard and Carla. So far we've given away 3 Surface laptops and 4 of the $500 gift cards. We've still got 2 more laptops and 3 more gift cards to give away later in this Megacast. And now it's time for our next presentation in the Megacast. And our next session comes from Rubrik. Presenting for Rubrik is Nick Calamani, Solutions Engineer. Nick, welcome to the webcast.
Thank you for having us, Scott. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, take it away.
Awesome, everyone. Pleasure to meet you. As it says here, I'm a solutions engineer for Rubrik. So what that really means is that I'm kind of on the ground front lines every day talking to either existing clients or prospects, of course, who have, kind of interesting data security needs. Rubrik is obviously a company that does, a few different things. Some folks know us for our immutable backup and data protection and things like that, but we really do a lot more than just that as well, especially in kind of the hybrid cloud, multi-cloud space, and with a security bent. So I've got just kind of a little evolution here of how we got to where we are today. Like I mentioned, we kind of started with Zero Trust data protection. Back in 2014, we were building a platform that was designed to be as immutable and uncompromisable as possible. We were doing things differently, like converging storage and software into a scale-out architecture, which at the time seemed, a little bit goofy, but as ransomware or, other malicious threats have become the forefront for an enterprise, this is really investment that's paid off. So, we're building a solution where even the administrators can't compromise the data, can't compromise the solution, really providing a Zero Trust security model before Zero Trust was on everybody's mind. And then kind of the middle where we started to bring it into the cloud space. I mentioned that we built a stack from scratch to do something new that hadn't really been thought of. And the benefit of doing that is that the stack ran both on-prem and in the cloud. So what we started doing was pulling everything into unified global management plane. So now that folks that had, of course, multiple data centers, kind of traditional layouts, could also start managing and protecting their cloud workloads with Rubrik using the exact same GUI, so that you didn't even have to worry about juggling multiple tools and, all the training and, goofiness that comes along with that. And then from there, we started getting deeper into security. I mentioned we built a secure platform. We built an immutable file system. We built a really cool metadata engine. And all this stuff is great for backup and recovery and whatnot. But what this same technology allowed us to do is learn about environments. I'll talk about our ransomware, data discovery tools, things of that nature, basically our ability to not only protect the data, but to understand the data and to be able to flag you either directly or through SIEM, SOAR tooling, things of that nature, that, hey, I've got a live ransomware attack in progress. I've got a rogue admin attack. I've got something going on that shouldn't be going on in my environment. And kind of the reason we're doing this is because, cyber attacks are on the rise. Obviously, that's kind of silly, right, to say that. But we don't really think about it in the way we should be. We've been traditionally layering infrastructure security on top of the problem. So obviously, perimeter tooling, network security, endpoint protection, application security. There's some great tool sets out there. And those are definitely not something you should just go and throw out the window today, for sure. But what all these tools are focused on is building a wall of protection to prevent people from getting to the data. But what we're seeing today is people are still getting to the data. And while it's not necessarily fun to spin up workloads again from scratch, rebuild applications, if you have your data and it's secure, protected, hasn't been tampered with, all that great stuff, it's much easier to recover a business than if the data was compromised, because honestly, in many cases, no matter what your industry is, if you've lost all your data, then you're kind of out of the game, so to speak. So we believe infrastructure security is not enough. And while some folks may think that, hey, look, I'm just going to keep layering stuff on, again, I would encourage you, read industry publications, go to the news. I mean, even as mainstream news is covering some of the more sophisticated attacks that are happening. And obviously, this is a webinar where we're discussing, what does it look like in a hybrid cloud world? I've taken this graphic actually from Azure's fundamental documentation. And I'm sure most of us are familiar with the shared responsibility model, and I've highlighted it. But the thing here to hit home is that while obviously the platform is maintained, managed, built, secured by the cloud service provider, the data on it, and more importantly, the access, identity, and accounts are still on the burden of the person using it. So just because you decide to decommission all your data centers, move everything to the cloud, does not necessarily mean that that data is protected. And kind of the reason that we decided to even go into the cloud security space is because it was on the rise as an attack footprint. Obviously, Microsoft also invested in Rubrik to co-engineer solutions. Native tools are just not enough, as much as we'd like to think. So native retention policies in most cloud solutions are sometimes actually being weaponized by attackers to expire data. So that gets us kind of onto the attack chain. Why are we even paying ransoms? Now, obviously, a ransomware in the attack in the cloud is not incredibly common. If you delete the data, that's usually good enough, because you can't get access to the hardware to do forensics and all that good stuff. So, regardless of ransom, malicious deletion, whatever, the kind of steps are the same. So we've gotten a note, or discovered something's been deleted that shouldn't be deleted. And, obviously the quick, easy option one is pay the ransom and, hope that you're going to recover. Many industry, reports have been done. Sophos did one recently. Other threat intelligence firms have done them as well, cyber response firms, where basically, even though you've paid a ransom, it's no guarantee you're actually going to get the data back. The goal is to make a profit, not necessarily to make a foolproof decryption tool for you to then get your data back. So the criminals are, leaving you with potentially half your environment unrecoverable, even if you pay the ransom. So obviously most people don't take this lying down, and they attempt to recover on their own. So obviously the song and dance happens. So you got to get IT operations, security operations, cloud admin, VMware admin, what have you, all these people in the room talking. And obviously these are areas that are traditionally separate. So the structures are just not in place for a smooth response scenario, especially when we're talking about a situation in which you're actively under attack. And, obviously, if your recovery response plan, all that stuff is stored electronically somewhere, they can be compromised, or, your team's channels have been compromised. You can imagine how this becomes a very, very cumbersome process to just coordinate internally even. Then obviously the bottom three graphics, is my data even recoverable? So we've gotten everyone together without, all of our collaboration tools have been hit. So we're on the phone, good old fashioned cell phone, right? And we've determined, okay, either the data is or is not recoverable. We're going to be spinning up backups to figure out when we can go back to before the attack actually was executed. But of course that could be, months ago for all we know. Then the next item is, what was even affected? Am I at risk for extortion? Have they stolen customer financial information? Are they going to, send me 2 ransom notes, 1 to unlock my data and 2 not to leak my data to the dark web? And, what's the scope of that? And then the final piece is kind of, how do we actually execute this recovery? Can we prevent reinfection, and how long is this going to take? Is this like a few hours, few weeks, few months? The average, I believe, also in the Sophos report that recently came out, this average recovery for ransomware time is still multiple weeks. It's just over 3 weeks at 23 days. So can you imagine mission critical stuff being down for 3 weeks? That would be pretty catastrophic to most businesses, even ones not in a technology space. So that's kind of where we fit in. So we're kind of at the intersection of infrastructure security, obviously everything above that you normally would need in an environment, cloud or on-prem, doesn't matter. And then data security is kind of what Rubrik sees ourselves as pioneering, the actual understanding of the data, the protection of the data and the recovery of the data in methodologies that previously weren't thought of, and doing this all using one tool set, regardless of where it is. Drilling down into these pillars just a little bit more, obviously, again, data resilience, are your backups immutable no matter where they are, on-prem or in the cloud? Great. If they're not, that's a problem. And then data observability. Having immutable backups doesn't do me any good if it turns out I've been backing up encrypted data for 5 weeks, and so obviously my clean backups have already aged out by then. Or, someone's just gone and deleted my backups alongside my environment. And then the third pillar of what Rubrik does is data recovery. Whether this be entire applications, entire data centers, or individual machines, individual files, again, on-prem, in the cloud. That's kind of what we're doing here. And then kind of how we tie it all together through Rubrik Security Cloud. And this is, I mentioned earlier, one GUI for all these tools. Again, I mean it. It's one GUI. Seriously, hold me to it. Email me. I'll do a live demo. And it is one tool for all your applications, regardless of what they are or where they are. So again, very consolidated tool set. Just a little bit of detail, because I'm sure it's going to get asked, how we do each of these things. Again, data resilience is kind of your, how are we actually protecting the backup data, not only from bad actors, but, perhaps rogue admin attacks, compromised credentials. I mean, by far the most common attack scenarios in the wild are compromising single sign-on, LDAP, things of that nature. And then if, someone just signs in as your global admin, how do you prevent them from doing things? So we've got a bunch of different technologies, intelligent data lock, basically, machine learning. Hey, we're seeing somebody try to delete something. It looks a little suspicious. They have permission to delete it, but we're going to hold on to it for a little while and notify people there's a problem. Cool, but maybe you want to be more preventative. So we've got a variety of retention lock technologies. So one of them is two-person rule. Basically, 2 people have to approve any change to data that is destructive, maybe shortening retention or all out deleting something. And this is, by the way, these are local accounts. So even if your global admin is on single sign-on or whatever, these have to be separate accounts that have no other permissions to do anything else. So we're trying to air gap as best as we possibly can from the common attack vectors that we actually see in the wild. But if that's not good enough, we also can do a hard retention lock, which is, by the way, SEC and FINRA compliant for folks in the financial industry, whereby basically you have to call in to Rubrik support, and only pre-validated, identity verified contacts have the ability to authenticate with Rubrik support. And then, of course, Rubrik support will remove a retention lock on something. So anyone can use that, but the reason we primarily developed that was financial services. But again, if this is a concern, you can use it as well. And then this may sound kind of silly, but just access control in general, MFA and one-time passwords. We've had MFA for a number of years now. We're making it mandatory. Again, the reason being that these are the most common types of attacks out there. So MFA cuts down on over 90% of attacks in the wild, and then we've layered on these additional technologies. So even if MFA is bypassed, an admin cannot delete something. Getting over to the right side of the slide, I know there's a lot of words here, but we put a lot of thought into this. We built a logical air gap into our application stack. Again, on-prem or the cloud, it doesn't matter to us. Basically, every component of our software stack communicates with itself using secured APIs. So let's say, someone somehow finds an exploit in the, web interface for Rubrik. They can't then, delete all your data, because the web interface can't make an API call to something that it's just not going to acknowledge the API call, because the API call doesn't exist. So the storage subsystem can be like, well, that's not a valid API command. I'm not going to do anything. Great. So even taking zero trust a step further, internally as well as externally. Obviously, next thing is encryption. That's kind of table stakes at this point, but you'd be surprised how many solutions in the market do not encrypt back-end traffic, which seems a little silly in 2022. And then immutability at the bottom right. Again, we built a file system for this. We didn't just repurpose an existing file system. We built a new file system called Atlas. It doesn't have delete commands. It's not a traditional read-write file system. And even as a global administrator, you cannot mount the file system directly. There's no access to this. Again, everything internally has to happen via an API call to present data. And even as we are presenting it, we're presenting a proxied copy. So even during a restore, for example, we are still not exposing the underlying file system to whatever client needs to make use of it. Again, seems a little over 2014 when we did all this stuff, but now this all makes a lot of sense in the age of cyber attacks. Second column, or rather pillar of what we do, is data observability. All that crazy technology to protect your backup data doesn't do any good if you're backing up junk data. So what this is a number of tools, actually. We have ransomware investigation. This basically is a very sophisticated machine learning pipeline that we developed to detect data attacks in an environment. So this is not some kind of change rate flagging kind of, generic, oh my gosh, your backup grew by X, so we're going to send you an alert. This is actually a tool set that learns the movement of data within your environment, no matter where it is. And so if you have, maybe an accounting share or repository where, records are stored and data is only ever added but never removed, just as an example, Rubrik learns that. So if someone goes in and either deletes something on accident or maliciously deletes it, we're going to flag that because we understand that this is a long-term archival storage system that data is never removed. That's just an example. We can also flag anomalies in other types of workloads as well, because again, this is a very advanced system that we built to actually learn your environment and what looks normal and what doesn't look normal. But taking it a step further, we actually have the ability to detect actual encryption events. So we run all the data through our machine learning pipeline. We're getting analytics, we're indexing metadata, all that great stuff, cataloging changes, but we're also checking for mathematic entropy, which is effectively encryption. So this is not dependent on signature-based identification. This is not an antivirus solution. What this is doing is it's actively looking at the data to discover when there's an attack, and then either alerting you, obviously you can get an email from Rubrik, but also we integrate with all kinds of security tooling, Palo Alto XSource, Splunk, you name it. We publish all of our APIs, which are, just generic RESTful APIs. So we're able to integrate with pretty much any security tooling out there. Even more incredible than, hey, I'm actually detecting real ransomware without alert fatigue, is that we also spoon feed you the exact snapshot to recover to, because we know, hey, look, the data was fine here, then it's encrypted. Here's where you need to get your data. Now, of course, this could be an entire machine, application, or you could just pull back individual files. Again, this is how you need to use it. But beyond that, we also do sensitive data content analysis. So things like HIPAA data, U.S. financial. We're basically doing content analysis in the background in the environment to see where this lives across your entire data estate. So, while it seems kind of interesting, you're like, why would I use this over maybe a traditional data governance tool or classification tool? The idea here is that because ideally you're backing up your entire environment, we're able to do context analysis on that data without actually having to install agents in the production environment. We can just do this all in the background. And sure, it's not instantaneous, but it also doesn't take a full team to set up and manage because it's all automatic happening in the background. For folks that maybe, they don't have any compliance, all that great stuff, you can still build your own templates for identifying maybe something unique to you. So maybe a customer number format or internal project codes, things like that. And so now you'll be able to realize, oh, look, somebody accidentally dumped a bunch of, sensitive project files to a cloud bucket somewhere. They were doing an app migration. They just forgot to clean up after themselves. Rubrik is able to identify and flag that so that you can understand where sensitive data lives across your whole environment. More importantly, is that we can also tie this to our ransomware tool. So if you are hit, we can actually look at the machines that have been hit, and we can tell you right there in the Rubrik GUI exactly what was affected, what was included in that machine. So now you can kind of understand your risk for exfiltration and the possibility of double extortion attacks. Again, pay me to unlock your data, pay me again so I don't leak your data. So quite a few different things that kind of this pillar includes. And then the last pillar is data recovery. So this is our ability to do, traditional site-to-site DR, but more importantly, this is also DR with cyber attack context awareness, because we could do same site failovers, we can do different cloud failovers, just depends on exactly how you want to set things up. So where a traditional DR tool is going to replicate the same malware attack that's happening in production, this tool is actually able to tie into our data observability suite to understand where the clean recovery points are, help you quarantine malware, all that great stuff. So this is kind of a really powerful series of tools, and it can do a bunch of different things. So a lot in there. Now, I'm sure this all sounds great, and you're probably wondering, what does this all look like? So I had a little technical trouble on my end, so I apologize, folks. I don't have a live demo for you, but I was able to get a few screenshots. So I know that those aren't nearly as fun, but I'm going to try to narrate them as best as I can. And I do see questions in chat. I promise to answer them. Nothing's off limits. Feel free to ask whatever you'd like. But I said one GUI. I meant one GUI. This is the GUI. Global dashboard. Obviously, we have 3 pillars, and conveniently, it maps to the GUI. So it's not just marketing for us. We've got data protection, our observability tools on the right, and then application recovery at the bottom right. Again, we're trying to go for simple here. Driving into what data protection would look like, we're getting away from managing clusters. So we got, you click on data protection from the global dashboard, you get to this kind of little sub dashboard, like overview of data protection. Instead of having to log into different on-prem clusters or different cloud environments and all that stuff, we've consolidated everything, put it all in one spot, And more importantly, the way we actually organize workloads is via a global inventory. So on the top bar, you can see clusters and all that. And that's cute, but we're getting away from managing all that. Whether you're all in the cloud or all on-prem, doesn't really matter to us. We put everything in the inventory. So inventory is all your workloads. So I can manage vSphere in the same interface that I'm managing EC2 or GCP instances. It doesn't matter because we're trying to get away from having to manage individual workloads and individual clusters and trying to remember which IP for this environment has this machine with this database. It's all in one place. The way we're automating that even further, for some of you who may be familiar with Rubrik, we kind of changed the game in 2014 by doing SLA domains. So, again, I'm sorry guys, these are screenshots, but these are just protection policies, basically. It says on the right in the middle, you can see I need a snapshot every day. I need to hold it for 30 days. I've got some weeklies and I've got some monthlies. What's important and kind of interesting on the large list on the left is that we can apply protection policies to different kinds of objects. So this whole thing is about how do you manage a security posture in a hybrid cloud environment. And the idea that you have to make different jobs and different protection schemes and different software tooling to do all that for different workloads doesn't make sense in 2022. So, we can even see on this list, this particular protection policy is being applied to SharePoint. It's being applied to EC2 machines, vSphere machines. It does not matter to Rubrik. We are smart enough on the back end and orchestrate all of this. And if you say, I need a backup every day, I'm going to do a backup every day regardless of what the workload is. You shouldn't have to mess with a bunch of different things regardless of where it lives in your environment. Back to the global dashboard. As best as I can narrate with screenshots. Again, I'm sorry, folks, for that. But if we click on the ransomware investigation tab, which is the applet and kind of the top right box, we're greeted, obviously, with one anomaly event. You shouldn't have that in production. So obviously, we've run ransomware in this demo environment, which is great for us because it allows us to demo exactly what this looks like. So we get some nice graphs, some details on what's going on. But more importantly, I can then get a list of the actual workloads impacted. So you can see on the kind of left column, I can obviously filter by object type and where it is and all that great stuff. In this particular environment, we've only run an attack against a small subset of virtual machines, but these could be file shares. These could be all kinds of different things. It doesn't have to be just virtual machines. At the top, we can see a little caret by those two first items, and those are actually blueprints for DR. So those are actually multiple systems that have been grouped together for an application. But we're just going to focus on one of the standard virtual machines listed further down. And you can see, obviously, we've got deleted, added, modified. Again, we have all this information because we're indexing the environment. And then we've got suspicious, that column there. And that's actually where we flag encryption. So we're actually taking a look, again, mathematically determining, hey, this is not readable data, and it used to be. This is a problem. Diving in a little bit further, I can actually go through the C drive and see exactly what files. Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in. We're just running up on time, so I just wanted to give you a quick time check.
Cool. Well, we're wrapping up in the end, so.
Okay,
of course. So again, I can do recovery, the whole machine, files, folders, doesn't matter. The kind of thing I'll link to real quick is the little view and data discovery button that appears hovering over the C drive. This is where we have the ability to look in and see what was compromised. Again, we know what's in files, we can understand that, and flag exactly where data is in your environment and what data was impacted in attack. So it's very straightforward tooling, very easy to use. And, with that, that's kind of the highlights of what I wanted to cover today. Happy to tackle Q&A whenever you're ready, Scott.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so, the first thing that I just wanted to ask you about is, since cloud credential compromise is the most common attack vector, how does Rubrik address that?
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit earlier, but that was a great question still. Basically, again, we're mandating multi-factor. For a long time we didn't, but it's just gotten to the stage where we're still seeing so many attacks preventable by multi-factor. We've decided to make it default in our product. We do actually have a ransomware response team, which is kind of where we collect a lot of our insights from actual clients who have been hit. Thankfully, none have had to pay a ransom because of what we're doing, but we still get very valuable insights into what's going on. And then additionally, like I mentioned, multiple approvers required for destructive changes, all that good stuff, so that even if you have bypassed MFA, you don't necessarily have the ability to damage the system.
Okay, super. Comment from Jonathan, very impressed with this file system, no delete or mounting options, smart. Edward is wondering, how much data can your system lock with intelligent data lock? And Edward says we're currently at 3, I think it's petabytes on our SAN.
Yeah, great question. Part of the reason we built the scale-out architecture is so that we could handle everything from a handful of terabytes up to clusters of 500 nodes. I think that's just shy of 1 exabyte per cluster. If you have more than 1 exabyte, that's fine. Just stand up a second cluster. If we're talking about on-prem, of course, cloud, there's really no limit. But yeah, we can protect several petabytes. That's not really a big deal from our perspective. All the same tools apply.
Okay, super. Well, Nick, unfortunately, it looks like we're out of time. But if somebody wants to get started with Rubrik, what do you recommend?
Yeah, honestly, the easiest thing is just rubrik.com. It's going to have a lot of white papers, briefs, information, as well as the ability to reach out and contact your account team in the area and get some consulting. And then, of course, I'll be sticking around. If people have additional questions, I'll be happy to answer them in the text chat.
Oh, that's awesome. We really appreciate it, Nick, because there are a lot of questions in there that we didn't get a chance to get to live here. So thanks so much for coming on and bringing us up to speed on Rubrik. Really appreciate it, Nick.
Of course. Have a great day, Scott.
You too. Okay, and now it's time for our next gift card and prize drawing. So for the $500 Amazon gift card, our winner is Augusta Wood of Colorado. And we have another grand prize Surface laptop to give away, and this one goes to Rob Fosnaugh of Indiana. So congratulations to Augusta and Rob. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes. And now it's time for the penultimate presentation in the Zero Trust Security Megacast. And our next session comes from Beyond Identity. And presenting for Beyond Identity is Hussein Bajwa, Vice President of Global Sales Engineering. Welcome, HB. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It's not often that you get introduced with penultimate, so I appreciate that.
Well, I'll turn it over to you for that penultimate presentation.
Sounds great. So most people call me HB, and the order of our presentation tends to be a little bit weird because our topic is going to be identity-first strategies for Zero Trust. But 5 years ago, when I was working on a rather large security project involving security questionnaires for a large managed service offering, I was pulling my hair out, and I called up one of my good friends who was doing third-party risk platforms and told him what I was running into. And he said, look, all you need to do is focus on 3 things if you want to add real value to the solution on the security side: passwords, patching cadence, and completeness of MFA. And I really heard those words and changed the way that I thought about the program that I was running and the managed services that we were offering. And so 2 years ago, when he called me up and said that he was working with the guys from Michael Lewis's New Thing book, who had done Silicon Graphics and Netscape, and that the team had figured out how to solve the passwords and MFA problem, I was super intrigued and ready to jump in. But the first thing he did was show me a quick demo, and it was impressive in its kind of unimpressiveness. And so since then, I've always liked to sort of start with a really quick demo. So here, you should be able to see my screen now.
I can see it, yep.
You can see it? Okay.
I do see it, yes, that's right.
So all I'm going to do is basically close out my screen. I'm going to log out of my Okta instance. It's going to bring me back to a login page. I have my platform authenticator up. This is my strong device authentication solution that stores asymmetric key information in my secure enclave on my Mac OS. And all I do is hit next. It processes on the platform authenticator, asks me for a biometric, and immediately logs me in. And my friend showed me that this was all he had to do to log in, day out, no second factors, no OTPs. And I was hooked. But then he also showed me that, and right now we're logged into my production corporate account. He also showed me the ability to set up a rich set of corporate policies so that the user and device credential can essentially be sent up to the cloud, serviced with a rich set of policy primitives defined by the corporation, enriched with additional external risk signals, and allowing precise, on-demand, just-in-time security assurance as people log into applications via their SSO. And from a policy standpoint, just a really quick thing to show like sort of what the zero trust capacity and capabilities are. When we look at an authentication transaction and are looking to address a specific platform, we can look at Mac OS, for example. We can add additional attributes that are specific to the Mac environment. Depending on which platform you choose, it quickly adjusts the list of options and gives you a pretty rich set of capabilities to integrate against. We also have a number of third-party integrations that are available out of the box. As Naren mentioned during the CrowdStrike session, choosing the right MFA and authentication solution is a pivotal part of a zero trust strategy. And so being able to take in, for example, CrowdStrike Falcon zero trust assessment scores and make a decision is one of the capabilities that we offer. And in a way, what we're doing is we're shifting what's typically a device level control to a transaction level at the application authentication time. And so really that's all I wanted to show, and also just demonstrate that, we run all of our own technologies, including all of the continuous authentication and zero trust solutions that we're going to talk about today. And so now, returning back to the presentation, you should see the regular screen now. My screen sharing should be down.
Yep, looks good.
And a lot of people have been talking about NIST zero trust authentication recommendations. There's been a lot of talk around mandates issued to agencies, activities around updating CISA rules and guidelines around threat and risk assessments. And when you read the material, the letter of the law sometimes is misleading. It makes very good recommendations, but not all of the recommendations are essentially equal. When a lot of the focus ends up being on passwords, this can be thought of very similarly to how original authentication standards that included directory authentication like X509. Back in 1987, when X509 was released, the standard was focused on strong authentication, but also gave some guidelines around simple authentication for passwords. Many of those recommendations have essentially evolved over time to include things like showing the password as a user is setting the password, encouraging the use of password managers, securing password storage methods, and avoiding password rotation rules. But if you look at the actual core of what the real recommendation is moving forward and not looking backward, use of multi-factor authentication along with unphishable credentials is a really core component. If you look at the adversary surface and threat actors in the world, more and more of them are adapting their TTPs to address greater adoption of MFA, but they're specifically targeting phishable MFA, phishable credentials. And this is where binding users to their devices and leveraging the capabilities of devices that have pretty much been universal since 2012, 2013, relating to secure enclaves and TPMs, places where on your mobile phone you can safely store your credit card information or your biometrics, or on your computer, the TPM and TEE allows you to do extremely high security assurance disk encryption. So these types of tools have been available for a long time. And when they start recommending the unphishable credentials or the phishing resistant type of MFA, this is really what they're talking about. And complementing all of this type of work, this trend towards zero trust, the winds of change that are pushing towards zero trust, we can see that adoption of continuous risk-based authentication is also pivotal to this. And continuous risk-based authentication has been available for a relatively long time in the tunneling-centric, encapsulation-centric, and firewall-centric worlds of kind of infrastructure management. But at the end point, being able to bring it to a transactional level on the application is a new capability, and you're seeing a lot of excitement because of new standards like CAPE and RISC coming out of OpenID's shared signals work. And when we look at context-aware device trust, the demonstration that I did was extremely fast, and it didn't really reveal what was going on under the hood. Fundamentally, we were taking a credential based on asymmetric keys. These types of credentials are now being described as passkeys in a lot of environments. And so we've been talking about them as universal passkeys in this context, because the idea of migrating from passwords to asymmetric key encryption-based credentials is super critical. Storing those credentials in a device-bound, non-exportable, unclonable manner is super critical. Once you have that credential and the assurance of where it's from, complemented with a right to use, the user entering a biometric or PIN, being able to send that request up to the cloud, process it with corporate policies that can be endlessly enriched with additional risk signals as well as the organic sensor collection and device telemetry information collected. Taking that information and then exchanging it in a rich way with sort of the ecosystem of solutions around it is an important part of this zero trust authentication trend and doing MFA the zero trust way. And this is another representation where we're showing the integration to your application or SSO. For workforce applications, the application or SSO would be something like an Okta or Ping or OneLogin, while the CRM, fraud and analytics, and other tools can be a variety of ecosystem partners that we have. And looking deeper at the architectural and deployment recommendations that are recently being pre-published by NIST, the zero trust architecture is being enriched. So traditional policy enforcement and authentication architectures going back 20, 25 years have taken this concept of policy enforcement points and policy decision points to heart and primarily serve these things using policy gateways interface to firewalls, VPNs, other types of infrastructure gateway products. And only enriching these policy decisions are all of these sort of auxiliary sensing components like the identity, credential, and access management components, the endpoint detection and response, or security analytics or data security. This policy information point enrichment is super critical and a reflection of sort of the API first nature of the cloud and how it's enabling new types of security integrations and driving that real importance of right-sizing your security infrastructure from the ground up. So while a lot of people may not have been thinking about authentication and access security as a critical component of their solution, bringing these prevention capabilities to the forefront and using the identity platform as the delivery mechanism for the policy decision point and most of the policy enforcement point via the platform authenticator is super important. And when you look at this architectural recommendation, delivering this is all based on having an unphishable multi-factor design, binding that user and device, focusing on the friction-free passwordless architecture, minimizing the user clicks and secondary device behaviors, both from a user experience standpoint and additional bounce points and potential compromise points. Introducing granular and fine-grained risk policy controls, ensuring the security of the device, having an active posture verification solution that can be coupled with continuous authentication capabilities, and then using the asymmetric key encryption as a mechanism for signing logs and assuring non-repudiation. So together, all of this stuff is able to provide a much higher level of assurance and access control. It really addresses a majority of the issues as people look to take implicit and transitive trust out of their environments and bring it to a zero trust environment. You can see this is also aligning with sort of this trend towards shift left security. If you look at where a lot of the conventional tooling of EDRs, MDMs, and VPNs has existed, it's been at the endpoint to cloud type of layer, and pushing it to the left using zero trust authentication is really where we think leadership comes in, and it's some of the most consequential changes to an environment that the person can conduct. Additionally, when we talk about these integrations, example here, taking that CrowdStrike zero trust score, being able to both use the zero trust score as an assessment criteria at the time of authentication for every granular authentication that a corporation might do, and then also assessing posture changes and reflecting them back to the platform. That's a super important capability. So having a bidirectional API first kind of integration is something that we're able to do because of the sort of unique simplicity and cloud and API first orientation of the product. So again, when you're looking at ideal solutions, all we ask is that people have an open mind. You have a lot of focus on React surface tools, solutions that mitigate and intervene on events. That event surface is continuing to be difficult to manage as more and more signals are extracted and adversaries continue to become more sophisticated. Alert-centric kind of reactive monitoring and management is really problematic. So as we move towards zero trust and look at what it really entails, part of the program needs to be strong preventative measures, and they're confidently authenticating the users, identifying devices, assuring that only appropriately managed and appropriately patched devices are being brought into the critical application surface, and then continuously authenticating and re-verifying and quarantining devices is really what we're looking at. And these are the things that we bring together with a frictionless user experience to be the leader in zero trust authentication. And yeah, I think the next presentation is going to be with Zscaler, and very similar to what we talked about with CrowdStrike. Because of our API first architecture, we're able to, within weeks, we'll have an integration to Zscaler as well, because as people transition from VPNs to modern SASE architectures, modern MFA and strong zero trust authentication is going to continue being super important. Any questions?
Yeah, great presentation, HB. And we do have a few questions here. And so before I put up the poll, I'll just leave these links here for a minute. First one I want to ask you comes from Varun, who's asking, how does Beyond Identity differentiate against Okta or Ping ID, for functionality?
I think that Beyond Identity was born to solve a very specific problem. The identity platform needs of post-password, cloud-centric, zero-trust native type of environments. And one of the core issues that exists with these types of solutions is the ability to be security first. So rather than seeing ourselves as an identity platform, we see ourselves as a security platform. So we like to complement the likes of Okta and Ping. They're some of our best partners. And what we're trying to offer is a solution that can plug in and augment those types of large-scale enterprise systems and provide them with upgraded security and eliminate the credential compromise surface that is endemic to most central authentication systems. So at Beyond Identity's core, what we've done is leverage the TPMs and secure enclaves on the devices to generate distributed asymmetric key pairs where the private key is always hermetically sealed in the device where it was originated. And all we do is create a simple public key directory that asks the platforms to simply sign and assure that they actually have possession of the credential in question. So using these types of approaches, we can, allow IT administrators and employees to rest easier that adversaries won't be able to compromise their devices and their lateral movement will be contained. So again, we see ourselves as a complement to those types of solutions with a focus on sort of capital S security.
Okay. All right, great. And I'm going to go ahead and put the poll up about additional information that people would like from Beyond Identity. Another question in here, HB, comes from Mark, who's asking, what are the advantages of using Beyond Identity compared to other vendors and products out there?
we focus on right-sizing and adapting to existing environments. So whatever your SSO solution is, using open standards and minimizing any kind of complex device or workflow login, we're able to be a self-contained solution that can be deployed for one user or all users for whatever period of time people are interested in. And our solution offers a universal cryptographic adaptation layer that takes away all of the complexity that's traditionally been associated with secure enclaves and TPMs. So we're able to provide all of those cryptographic promises without the challenges of centralized CAs and complex HSMs and signing ceremonies and certificate rotation and key rotations that were endemic to earlier versions of kind of PKI deployments.
Okay. All right, great. Probably have time for, one more. Here's what traditional strong authentication methods like MFA tend to drive users away, but is there an alternative? How can we build a zero trust strategy when ramping up authentication without driving users away?
So that's a really important point. I think eliminating the friction, bringing things to single device wherever possible, leveraging the fact that a TPM or secure enclave is identical to a USB security key that a person might have externally, but is incorporated into the device and has traditionally been inhibited in adoption because of operating system obtuseness and complexity. So being able to create a simple way to integrate across Android, iOS, macOS, Windows, and Linux with a single consistent user experience that has this policy-driven capability and focuses on being rich from a security perspective and lightweight enough to not incite any worries about creepiness or overbearing kind of oversight. I think those are the things, is that as we educate the users on the value of strong authentication, using genuinely unphishable credentials protects them. They're at risk. Developers, high-value finance employees, high-value HR employees, these are the targets that adversaries are going after as they look to destabilize or ransom more and more complicated environments. So being able to offer this level of personal protection and contrasting it with the kinds of solutions that some organizations are starting to adopt, like overly kind of intrusive virtual desktop scenarios or continuous decrypting proxies or whatnot, remote browsing isolation. These things have their time and place, but as universal tools that monitor devices or MDMs that are doing excessive background screen capture or analytics, those kinds of things are the trade-offs. Like, do you want security or do you want better user experience, or do you want privacy? And I think that zero trust authentication and MFA done the zero trust way with passwordless is the right option to balance all of those concerns.
Okay. No, that's great advice. And HB, it looks like we're running out of time, but if somebody wants to get started with Beyond Identity or find out more, what would you recommend as next steps?
I'd recommend visiting our website or reaching out to me. My email is on the slides. We're happy to have further conversations. I love talking technical details, so if there's any additional questions and sort of low-level stuff, I'm happy to oblige. But on our website, you can get tons of information and demos and trial requests.
Okay, great. Well, HB's email is there at the bottom of the screen, so I'll just leave that up while we do the prize drawing. But HB, thank you so much for coming on and giving us this update on Beyond Identity. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And now it's time for our next to last gift card drawing. This $500 Amazon gift card goes to Kyle Kanja of Hawaii. So congratulations to Kyle. We'll be in touch about claiming your prize. But believe it or not, we have reached the final presentation in the Zero Trust Security Megacast from Actual Tech Media. We're so glad you stayed with us through all of these fantastic presentations. And our last presentation comes from Zscaler. And presenting for Zscaler is Ankit Gupta, who's Senior Product Marketing Manager. Ankit, welcome.
Thank you, Scott, and pleasure to be here. Hey, everyone. My name is Ankit Gupta, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Zscaler. And today I'm here to talk about Zero Trust with Zscaler. So without further ado, I think we can start.
Yep, please, go right ahead.
All right. So I'll start with a little bit of history, Scott. Like for the past few decades, wide area networks, were built and optimized to connect every remote office and application to this data center. We call this hub and spoke network. If you look at this diagram, this is a hub and spoke network which many of the enterprises currently have. And you see all these B2B, B2C, DMZ zones, and the data center in the middle, and we are trying to protect all the applications around it. This works fairly well when users were in offices and applications were in data center. They could access the applications directly. But to access an application, you had to be on this trusted network. You secured the network by creating a perimeter with firewall known as the castle and moat security. This network and security architecture kind of served us reasonably well till now, right? And it made perfect sense when the data center was the center of gravity and all the roads from every branch office led to the data center. But the world has changed. We are seeing application and network transformation, where applications no longer reside in the data center, and they've moved to SaaS and public clouds. The workforce has gone remote thanks to COVID. Remote work accelerated exponentially in the last couple of years. Traffic should, and it eventually will find a way to take path of least resistance to go directly to cloud if you're working remotely, so that you can have that fast and seamless user experience. So that raises the question that do we really need to backhaul the traffic to the data center? Because it's like you're flying from Boston to New York, right? And you're going through Dallas or you're going to Atlanta as a kind of a layover. That doesn't really make sense. So all these application and network transformation has led to what we are seeing as a security transformation. As corporate network, is evolving to direct cloud, the castle and moat security models that were kind of built to protect those hubs have to give away for a new architecture. They are getting obsolete. And the key to securing these modern enterprise focus directly on securing users, data, and application. And this what leads us to a zero trust architecture. A zero trust solution is a kind of a highly available security solution that provides the right user access, the right applications, irrespective of their network location or device. And in the next slide, I'll go a little bit in detail into what zero trust really is and talk about its architecture. But first, I want to kind of zoom into how hub and spoke and castle and moat security are creating issues. So we previously saw that hub and spoke was kind of designed for users and applications to be on the same network, right? But the users and applications, like I said, have moved out. To secure them, what corporate networks have to do is to extend their networks to those remote applications, to those cloud applications, and to their users. So what it means is if you have 500 branches, your trusted network actually gets extended to 500 locations. And if you have 30,000 users sitting remotely, your network is getting extended to those 30,000 homes. So your network is extended all the way out where your applications and users lie as per this architecture. What it is exactly doing is it's creating a flat network that extends to all these places. What ends up happening is you're creating attack surface that extends beyond the corporate network and extends all the way out. A lot of networks kind of try to move away from it with, moving from physical firewalls and using virtual appliances in the cloud and, using virtual firewalls. But that doesn't solve the problem. It might give some marginal benefits, it might reduce your MPLS costs, marginal user experience benefit. But overall, if you think about it, you're still extending your network, you're not extending it to branches, you are extending it to every public cloud, and it becomes a part of your whole network because you're spinning those virtual firewalls over there. What ends up happening is, because you're extending your network, it comes in the radar of the attack surface. So attackers can find you and they can compromise you and they can eventually move laterally. So it does not matter if it's a physical firewall or a virtual firewall. They're all part of the attack surface. It's easy to find all the devices. If you're a networking guy, you can tell, once you're in a network, you can use something like an nmap. You go into the subnet, see all the devices in the subnet, find those. So think about it as an attacker. You go into a network, find that network, find the devices, move into the devices, move laterally and attack them, right? And this has happened in the real time. We've seen this example in real time with Colonial Pipeline, right? The largest fuel pipeline in US where attackers stole user VPN credentials, got to the corporate network, moved laterally across critical financial applications, stole the data, and finally Colonial Pipeline had to pay ransomware to kind of get rid of it. So this is a real issue in the networks. So now I just glance over, the things I already touched upon. We've seen these transformations that I was talking about. The first is applications are moving to cloud and SaaS. More and more. If I ask here, most of the applications that you guys work on, they've either moved to cloud or are in the transition to cloud, be it hosted on AWS, Azure, or SaaS applications like M365. It's moving to the cloud. No surprise. Second, thanks to COVID, workforce has gone increasingly remote. It's hybrid is the new normal. Third, firewalls are getting increasingly breached. This number of stats showing that, I was reading somewhere there's predicted up to $40 billion of ransomware that will be mostly coming from firewall breaches. So how do we tackle all that? That's, Zero Trust is kind of the solution that overcomes the loopholes or the voids of the legacy architecture. I would just want to glance over here what really Zero Trust is, because there's still a lot of confusion about Zero Trust. Some think it's a product solution, it's a platform. It's actually none of that. Zero Trust is actually a mindset that's based on the principle of never trust, always verify, and the least privilege access. It basically assumes that no user or application should be inherently trusted, right? It assumes that security risks are present both inside and outside of the network. Nothing is trusted by default. So that's the reason it's called Zero Trust. And there is a NIST kind of defines that Zero Trust architecture in the NIST 800-207 paper. You can all go Google and find it. It kind of give fine details of how a Zero Trust architecture should be. And I'll just spend a few minutes on describing that. So if you see the diagram in the middle, on the left, you see any entity that's trying to connect resource on the right. So entity can be a user, application, machine, IoT, and that's trying to connect to a resource that's all the way on the right. Could be an application, data, system, and that can be hosted anywhere. It could be on private data center, public cloud, it could be on internet. So NIST suggests that before connecting the entity to and the resource, we need to do some kind of policy enforcement or policy decision in the middle before sending a user application access. Only then they can actually access the information. So that policy enforcer or PDP, PEP, which sits in the middle between the entity and the resource. And NIST has defined like the 7 tenets of Zero Trust. I won't go over all of them. But what these tenets are basically these are kind of the guidelines that are needed for a solution to be called as a zero trust solution. And I'll just point out a couple, right? Like number 3, access is not granted to the network. It's granted per session. It's one-to-one correlation between the entity that's trying to connect and the resource itself. Like number 4, as access is based on dynamic view of context. Like this is an important distinction from what we previously did security. What does that mean? It means that when we want to enable connectivity, we do it with minimal disruption, and the policy is updated dynamically based on context. And context could be anything. It could be user ID, geolocation, IP address, device posture, time of the day. There are many defined contexts. So all these tenets are kind of the needed for any solution that needs to be called as a zero trust solution. So now I'll dive into how Zscaler implements zero trust, and we do it through what we call as the zero trust exchange. So Zscaler has pioneered the concept of zero trust with a purpose-built cloud platform we call Zero Trust Exchange, which acts as an intelligence switchboard that security connects users to apps, apps to apps, machine to machine over any network at any location. So basically connect anything to anything. What it does, it enables users, workloads, IoT, OT devices, and by security connect to internet, SaaS access, private app access. And it's not just limited to a specific kind of user or device. It could be a managed, unmanaged, it could be an IoT device. And Zero Trust Exchange integrates with application location as the destination, which you see on the top as the resource, be it a data center, public cloud, or a SaaS application. And users are shown, and if you see how we've put it is, users are shown at the bottom. Like I said, it could be any device, app from any location, and Zero Trust Exchange sits in the middle, in line as the policy enforcement. So if you just remember what I just showed from the NIST architecture, that completely this architecture completely aligns with NIST, right? Where a policy enforcer sits in between the entity and the resource that are being trying to connect. So what Zero Trust Exchange does is it uses context to establish secure connections based on policy. It uses identity as the first and foremost piece of context, and then we have integrations with major identity providers to do that. And then for additional context and security, we integrate with major endpoint vendors like Microsoft, VMware, and CrowdStrike. And experience is very core to the Zero Trust Exchange. So it feeds the logs to security operations to simplify security analysis to ensure great user experience. So what this architecture does is, and I'll go zoom in a little in the next slide, how Zero Trust Exchange works. But what it essentially does is it eliminates the need of firewalls or VPN infrastructure, Swig appliances, that all kind of are part of the legacy infrastructure and kind of overcomes all those the loopholes that they possess. So now let me zoom a little bit into the Zero Trust Exchange architecture. So, like we showed previously, below you see the user devices, the entities, and above you see the entities where they're trying to connect, and the applications could be in, it could be an internet, data center, public cloud, and Zero Trust Exchange, like I showed before, sits in middle as the policy enforcer. Again, completely aligning with this framework. So let's see, what happens when a user or device tries to connect. First we do is terminate the connection, and we do it as a proxy, not like legacy where you're passing the data and then inspecting, and then finding out what's happening. We first stop the connection, stop the session. And then we check the connection by comparing identity through access vendors to be able to see who is this person, what are their credentials, and what are they allowed to do. If they're not allowed to access that specific resource, when we check with the identity, we then terminate the connection immediately. We have API integrations with all major identity providers to establish identity, like we have integrations with Okta, Ping, and several others. If allowed, we then verify context that gets collected. What's their role, what device they're on, what app they're trying to access, what content they're exchanging. And then we determine how we allow to access. And like I said before, we integrate with major endpoint vendors such as Microsoft, VMware, and CrowdStrike for this. What we then do is evaluate risk, check for security of the content. The ultimate goal of any security technology is to protect sensitive data, right? And that includes encrypted data. Today, more than 90% of the data is encrypted. What Zero Trust Exchange does is it allows SSL inspection at scale. I like to point out that in legacy firewalls, they're not capable of effectively identifying and controlling the data in motion, especially the encrypted data. They roughly inspect less than kind of like 20% of the encrypted data. Next, what we do is enforce policy. After identifying the user and where the target resource is located, whether it sits in private cloud, public cloud, data center or more, based on that, policy is enforced on the users, whether to allow the user, block it, warn it, isolate it. So that based on that, the connection gets established. So if all looks good, we now initiate the connection with identity through the app connector. So app connector is, in general, applications are exposed to internet, right? If you are able to see an application, guess what? Even the attacker can see that application because it's routable. But with Zero Trust Exchange, these applications sit invisible because there's an app connector that basically knows where the app sits in the private cloud, public cloud, and data center, and shields them as it sits in front of them. So the connectivity is to the app connector within Zero Trust Exchange and the app, and it's not direct. So with this architecture, and risk is continuously evaluated, even if once the connection gets established. What it does is it basically eliminates the attack surface since the app connector creates an outbound connection to the exchange. And the applications are sitting behind the connector and they're basically invisible. So they're always protected. Like you see here, even once the connection is established, there is continuous risk assessment to make sure that there is no risk involved while there is a connection. How is this improvement? So this is a huge shift how we used to secure before with the perimeter security with firewalls and VPNs. Oh, let me go there again. There you go. So if you see here in the legacy architecture, essentially has a pass-through architecture, right? That allows for traffic to pass and then look for vulnerabilities. And what this model does is exposes large attack surface and is prone to lateral movement of threats. And like I said before, right, this is not something that's new. It has happened before. The Colonial Pipeline is one example. There are many other public examples where firewalls got breached and due to and caused lateral movement of threats. So I just wanted to glance over this slide to show how we kind of work with the ecosystem of best of breed of platforms, right? For example, for identity management, we work with Okta, Ping, Active Directory. Endpoint management, work with VMware, Intune, Splunk. And these are just some of the logos. There are a small set of many vendors we collaborate with. With this 120 plus vendor we collaborate with, and might be actually more as I speak. So what it does is it basically shows that how we are eliminating those point solutions and allow for vendor consolidation with working with best in the breed platforms. So I talked about the architecture, right? And this is kind of a 50,000 footer view of how Zero Trust Exchange simplifies networks and as a huge transition from network security. On the left, you see a typical network security architecture with firewalls, VPNs in different zones. And Zero Trust becomes a one-stop shop where it has all the security solutions and all the network traffic goes to it. So basically one comprehensive security platform that offers all the capabilities, be it cloud firewall, sandboxing, intrusion protection, cloud swig, ZTNA, browser isolation, risk management, just to name a few. These are all part of Zero Trust Exchange. What it does is it makes it more scalable, and scalability of point products is dependent at times limited by the availability of data center. But Zero Trust Exchange kind of brings them all together and is able to scale. Just speaking of scale, right? I wanted to kind of glance over some of the stats that I think are incredible. We are the largest inline security cloud sitting in 150 data centers around the globe across 6 continents to bring security close to the user for a fast user experience. We push around 250,000 plus unique security updates per day from these 150 data centers. And the most interesting one, which I find, is that Zero Trust Exchange processes over 200 billion transactions a day. If you compare it just with any other number, that's, for example, like Google searches, there are 5.6 billion Google searches a day. So you can just kind of see the scale of number of transactions that are handling. So these are just kind of proof points of our scaling capabilities. So the last thing I wanted to point is, it's not just our customers and partners who recognize us, right? Gartner has placed us on the top in the recently published, Gartner Magic Quadrant for Secure Service Edge, SSE as we call it. And Zscaler is positioned as vendor with the highest ability to execute among 11 vendors that were recognized in the report. Gartner basically assesses vendors' ability to execute based on a number of factors, including product services, customer experience, market responsiveness, track record, market execution, sales, pricing, and many other things. And we're proud to say that Zscaler came out on the top on those. Cool. So that's pretty much I have. And if I'm open to questions. If you have any questions, you can answer them now.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. And just so great presentation. And while we do go through a couple of the audience questions, I do want to put up the poll quickly, just about what additional information people would like about Zscaler. But so the first question here is they're asking, is Zero Trust Exchange a ZTNA platform?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go. So yeah, we get this a lot. So ZTNA is a capability, that's part of Zero Trust Exchange. Zero Trust Exchange has many more capabilities beyond ZTNA, like CASB, SWIG, like I mentioned in the presentation. And ZTNA itself is a Zero Trust use case that offers users secure access to applications and data, and Zero Trust is basically a mindset, and the Zero Trust Exchange can provide ZTNA capabilities and other capabilities to secure user and applications. Was there a follow-up, Scott, for that?
Yeah, so the follow-up was, what's the difference between ZTNA and Zero Trust?
Yeah, so ZTNA is the technical, to simply put it, ZTNA is kind of the technology to implement Zero Trust, right? With Zero Trust, like I said, it's a security mindset that no user or application is inherently trusted. And ZTNA is how you implement Zero Trust to kind of provide secure access to user and applications.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. That's helpful. Next one, they're asking, how do I migrate my existing firewall policies to Zscaler?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So, what I suggest is it doesn't have to be a sudden change where you completely take the plug off from firewalls and move to Zero Trust. It cannot be like that. It's a gradual transition. What we suggest is first move some of the policies, some of the user and applications to a Zero Trust model. Maybe something simple like a Microsoft 365 application that you use a lot, move that to a Zero Trust model, build your confidence, move your user and application, and then start transitioning other applications to a Zero Trust model or Zero Trust Exchange. So, and within Zscaler, we have team that helps you make that transition. So, and if somebody wants to reach out, can check out our website or email. I can provide my email so we can connect you with the right team.
Okay. All right, great. And here's another, won't Zero Trust Exchange be a choke point if everything goes through the exchange, essentially a proxy?
Yeah, so the short answer is no, because Zero Trust Exchange, how it works is, as I showed in the architecture diagram, it determines where the closest application exists, and then uses the location to determine what is the closest application to that user. So we have 150 data centers that are spread across the world. So it depends on where the user is. the Zero Trust Exchange use that instance to connect to the right application. And like the slide I showed, the number of transactions are huge. So that doesn't show any user or application performance because we sit so close to the user. So.
Okay. Super.
I hope that answers. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. So it looks like we're running out of time, but if somebody wanted to get started with Zscaler or find out more, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend going to our website. If you want to learn about the platform, go to the one you see on your screen, zscaler.com/platform Zero Trust Exchange. You can reach out to me directly if you want. My email address, it's not here, but I can tell it's ankit.gupta@zscaler.com. And you should find your answers. And if you want to connect to the sales team, I'd be happy to do that too.
Okay. Well, super. Well, Ankit, thank you so much for being here and giving us this update on Zscaler and what you guys are doing around Zero Trust. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you all for listening to me. Thanks.
Okay. Well, we've done it. We've come to our final prize drawing of the day. We've already given away 6 huge gift cards and 4 Surface laptops. We've got 1 more of each to give away now. So the winner of our final gift card is Dan Druckenmiller of Ohio. And the winner of the last Surface Laptop Grand Prize is Jeff Wadsworth of Pennsylvania. Congratulations to Dan and to Jeff. And to all the winners, we'll be in touch about claiming your prizes on gift cards we had. Tina Chisholm of Georgia, Peter Troutman of Ohio, Krishna Reddy Yanika of Virginia, Richard Cook of Indiana, Augusta Wood of Colorado, Kyle Kanja of Hawaii, and Dan Druckmiller of Ohio. And again, for the Surface laptops, the winners were Chad Dam of North Dakota, Cameron Covey of Oklahoma, Carla Ness of Texas, Rob Fosnaw of Indiana, Jeff Wadsworth of Pennsylvania. And as a reminder, you did have to be in attendance to win, but if you were, we'll be in touch via email about claiming your prize. And a couple of quick reminders before we wrap up here today. Just a quick shout out to the ransomware.org site. It's a fantastic resource. I can't emphasize this enough. It's a sister resource of Actual Tech Media and the Megacasts. Just fantastic information about ransomware, how to understand it, how to prevent it, and how to recover from it. If you liked what you saw today and you think that you have a solution that would benefit from being one of the featured solutions, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. You can contact us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. We have these EcoCasts, Megacasts, Summits, and many other event types. And speaking of other event types, tomorrow we have an expert series coming up, kind of similar to today in focus on choosing your next firewall, key features and decision points. This is going to be a great session with Evgeny Karam, who's just a real security expert, great presenter. He'll be talking tomorrow at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. So be sure to sign up for that one. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank all of our presenters today for putting together such great presentations and offering their insights and Q&A. I want to thank all of our participants who made this event possible. It was CrowdStrike, Keeper, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, AMD, Axis, Rubrik, Beyond Identity, and Zscaler. And last but not least, we'd like to thank all of you for attending today's Megacast from Actual Tech Media and for all of your great questions. Those questions really do power our events. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.